Hey guys, tonight we step into the Amazon rainforest together. The kind of place that doesn't just look alive, it feels alive like the air itself has a pulse. You can almost taste the green before you fully see it. The sky is sliding into deep blue twilight, and the first stars are trying to show off, but the forest keeps stealing the spotlight with its own quiet glow. Wet leaves catching the last light, a thin mist hovering low, and a few fireflies blinking like they're testing a microphone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me where you're listening from and what your local time is. I love picturing all of us scattered across the map. Different rooms, different nights, the same gentle story traveling through the dark. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet find the ground first. It's not a bold, clear trail so much as a polite suggestion. Packed earth softened by old leaves, springy enough that every step lands quieter than it should. Humidity wraps around you like a warm towel that forgot it was supposed to cool down. You inhale and the air comes in heavy, almost sweet, carrying that clean, earthy smell people always try to bottle and always fail to get right. Soil and sap, rainwater, bruised herbs, and something faintly citrus drifting in and out like a memory. Above you, the canopy is a ceiling you can't really see yet. You know it's there because the light has changed. Twilight in the open fades like a straight line. Twilight here fades in layers. The last daylight filters through leaves like green stained glass, turning everything into mossy shades and dim gold. The trunks look older, the shadows look deeper, and the whole place feels wrapped in velvet. This is the Amazon, and it's so large your mind tries to file it under one word. Huge, so it doesn't have to deal with how real it is. A rainforest can become wallpaper in your head. Palms, vines, parrots, the usual greatest hits. But out here, scale becomes a sensation. Sound arrives from far away and still feels close. Damp air clings to your skin like it belongs there. Your breathing slows down without being asked. You've probably heard the nickname, the lungs of the planet. It's a line that sounds incredible on a poster, and posters are great at one thing, sounding incredible. The truth is quieter and better. The Amazon isn't a pair of lungs the way your body has lungs. It's a living exchange system, billions upon billions of leaves acting like tiny doors, opening and closing, trading gases and water with the atmosphere in a steady rhythm. In light, those leaves pull in carbon dioxide and use it with water and sunlight to build sugars, stored sunlight, basically. Oxygen leaves as a byproduct, like a soft sigh. In darkness, plants still burn some of that stored sugar for energy, using oxygen the way you do. That's why the lungs idea gets tricky if you take it literally. The forest produces oxygen and it consumes oxygen. It's not a simple scoreboard, and it doesn't have to be to matter. What makes the metaphor feel true is everything else the forest does while it breathes. It locks away an enormous amount of carbon in living tissue, with leaves, roots, built from what used to be invisible in the air. It also moves water upward, tree by tree, releasing moisture through leaves until the air itself starts to feel like it's been softened from the inside. If your breathing is a tide inside your chest, this is a tide spread across millions of crowns. Stand still, and the forest rewards stillness immediately, like it's been waiting for you to stop doing that frantic human thing where you stomp around demanding entertainment. When you pause, the small sounds rise up. Insects make a gentle shimmer that resembles rain on paper. A bird offers one clipped call, just one, and then the quiet knits itself back together. Somewhere deeper, a frog releases a single rounded note that hangs in the air like a slow bell. Quiet doesn't mean empty here. Quiet means layered. It doesn't ask you to perform. The forest doesn't care if you're productive or efficient or on brand. It simply runs its systems, and you happen to be standing inside them. People also imagine rainforests as chaos, everything fighting for space all at once. But watch for a minute, and it starts to look like choreography. Leaves angle themselves to catch light without wasting effort. Vines climb without apology. In the dim understory, young trees wait, patient and stubborn, for a single bright opening. One fallen trunk, one gap in the ceiling, and then they surge upward when their moment arrives. Even the ground under you is part of that quiet discipline. Much of the rainforest's nourishment doesn't sit in the soil like treasure, it moves. Warmth and rain break down fallen leaves fast, and the forest recycles those nutrients through fungi, microbes, and roots, returning them to living plants again and again. Yesterday's leaf becomes tomorrow's growth without ceremony, like a breathing cycle you don't notice until you pay attention. A moth flutters past your shoulder, close enough to feel like a thought crossing your mind. It isn't here to bother you. It's here because the forest runs on relationships. Plants and insects and birds and fungi are rarely solo artists. They trade, they borrow, they collaborate, they compete quietly. Even the bits that annoy you have a role. The mosquitoes exist, yes, and yes, they act like they own the place. In a way, they do. If one finds you tonight, consider it the Amazon's tiny, smug reminder that you're a guest here. You tilt your head back again and try to see the canopy properly. It remains a suggestion in the darkening air, a thick silhouette made of overlapping leaf shapes. Somewhere up there, branches are braided together by vines and epiphytes, plants that live on other plants without stealing their food, cling to bark like polite tenants. You don't meet them fully yet. You only sense the vertical city above you, stacked in layers, each one with its own rules about light and wind. The temptation is to throw numbers at the experience because the numbers are spectacular. The rainforest spans an area so vast that weather patterns take it seriously. It holds an extraordinary share of the planet's biodiversity. Species you know, species you don't, and plenty that still haven't been formally described. But the forest offers a gentler way to understand abundance, small proofs. A broad leaf overhead catches a droplet and holds it for a beat, then releases it. Talp! Another leaf answers with its own softer tap. That droplet might have been in a river days ago, lifted into the air by heat, carried as vapor, and returned through the forest's steady moisture. Even in a quiet moment, you're standing inside a moving system. You walk on, and the trail dips slightly. The air cools in the low spot, and the smell changes. Less leafy, more mineral like wet stone. That change is the first clear hint of water nearby, and it sparks curiosity in the calmest way, like a lantern turning on somewhere ahead. There's no sign, no announcement, no dramatic cue, just the soft pull of scent and sound. A pocket of twilight opens between trunks, and through it you catch movement. Dark water sliding past, slow and steady, reflecting the last scraps of sky. It isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's a pulse line, a quiet current with the confidence of something that has been moving like this for a very long time. You're close enough now to hear it clearly, a soft, continuous hush like someone turning pages in a book that never ends. The river keeps sliding past you with that page-turning hush, and for a moment you can't tell whether it's moving quickly or whether your sense of time is just politely surrendering. You crouch near the edge and the smell sharpens. Fresh water, wet wood, a faint tea-like tang from leaves steeping somewhere upstream. The surface looks calm, but it's the kind of calm that comes from scale. Small streams chatter. Big rivers don't need to. You let your fingers hover close to the water, not quite touching because you can feel the coolness rising off it. It's a relief against the warm air, like the forest offering you a cold drink without making a big deal about it. When you finally dip your fingertips in, the current tugs softly, not enough to pull you, just enough to remind you it has opinions. This is the Amazon River, the main artery, and even saying that sounds dramatic, like the river asked for a narrator. It didn't. The river does not audition. It just exists at a size your brain tries to reduce into a simple image. Because if you truly picture it, the numbers get weird. A river with so much water that it behaves more like an inland sea in places. A river whose mouth is so wide that people argue over where the river ends and the ocean begins, because the freshwater pushes out into the Atlantic like it's claiming space. A river that can carry whole trees, whole islands of floating plants, whole weather moods. You listen again and notice something subtle. The sound isn't uniform. It has tiny variations, as if the water is brushing different textures. Sandbar here, submerged roots there, a slow eddy curling around something heavy below. Your eyes follow the darker band near the far side where the current is stronger and a lighter band near the bank where it relaxes. Even in low light, the river has lanes like it's running a quiet traffic system. If you stay here long enough, don't worry, you're not required to do field work. This is sleep science, not a final exam. You start to notice the river's habits. The way it eats one bank and builds the other. The way it moves, sound like a patient sculptor. The way it bends, loops, cuts, and remakes itself. Rivers are never really still. They're just slow at the kind of timescale humans pretend doesn't count. The Amazon is especially good at reminding you that your timescale is adorable. You walk along the edge where the forest opens just enough to give you a view, and you realize the river is writing the schedule for everything around it. This isn't a backdrop. This is the planner. The river decides when land is land and when land becomes water. It decides when roots get air and when they learn to breathe underwater. It decides which seeds get carried, which nutrients get delivered, which animals have a highway and which have a wall. The most soothing part is that it does this with repetition. Not the boring kind, the dependable kind. There's a rhythm here called the flood pulse, and it's basically the Amazon's annual deep breath. Over the course of the year, the water rises and falls, sometimes by several meters, sometimes enough to turn whole forests into shallow lakes. The dates and heights vary from place to place, because the basin is enormous and rains don't fall everywhere at once. But the pattern is steady enough that life has built itself around it like it's a calendar no one needs to print. When the water rises, fish travel into the flooded forest to feed on fruit and insects and whatever else becomes available when trees are standing in water. When the water falls, those fish retreat to the main channels, carrying energy back with them. Some trees time their fruiting, so seeds drop when the water is high, letting fish and currents do the shipping. It's the kind of distribution network humans try to build with barcodes and warehouses. The forest just uses gravity, water, and patience. You lean against a trunk, and the bark is cool and damp under your palm. The tree feels solid, but somewhere inside it is a plan for flood season. Some floodplain forests, those areas that flood regularly, are like specialists. They've got species adapted for wet months, with roots that tolerate low oxygen and trunks that don't panic when the waterline climbs. Other areas, higher ground, stay comparatively dry and host a different cast of characters. The river doesn't create one forest. It creates a mosaic, shifting habitats like tiles that fit together in endless patterns. Even the water itself comes in personalities. Some parts of the Amazon system are white water, carrying pale sediment eroded from the Andes. That sediment makes the water look like cafe con leche in the right light. Milky, nutrient-rich, heavy with minerals. Whitewater rivers tend to feed fertile floodplains, the kind that can grow plants fast and thick, because the river is basically delivering slow-motion fertilizer. Then there's black water, which isn't dirty so much as stained, dark like strong tea, colored by tannins from decaying leaves, and wood in sandy, nutrient-poor areas. Black water can look almost glossy, reflecting the sky like a mirror. It often feels softer, gentler, like it's been filtered through the forest chemistry. It can be more acidic, too, which changes what can live there. Different fish, different plants, different rules, same soothing logic. The chemistry shapes the community. And there's clear water, which can run greenish or bluish, carrying less sediment, often flowing over rock and sand. Clear water can look inviting in a way that makes you want to step in, until you remember you're not an Amazonian fish and you have exactly zero evolutionary credentials for this environment. You can admire it from the bank like a sensible person who enjoys sleep. Sometimes these waters meet and don't mix right away. You can get long seams where dark and light flow side by side, like a gentle marbling. It's one of those scenes that feels like a magic trick until you realize it's just physics and chemistry and temperature and speed, all being extremely polite about their boundaries. You watch the river surface again, and tiny rings form where something beneath breaks the skin. Could be a fish gulping air. Could be an insect landing. Could be the river reminding you it's never fully quiet. The sound stays soft, but your mind starts to see how much is happening under the surface. Currents braided together, suspended sand drifting like underwater dust, logs rolling slowly on the bottom. Entire migrations you'll never witness directly. The Amazon basin is laced with tributaries, streams, channels, floodplain lakes. So many pathways that the river isn't a line, it's a web. From above, it looks like veins spreading across green tissue, but standing here, it feels more like a vast, patient conversation between land and water. Rain falls in one place, runs into a creek, joins a stream, becomes a river, and eventually, after a long, wandering journey, reaches this main flow. And while it travels, it picks up stories. Minerals, leaves, microorganisms, heat, dissolved gases, the occasional confused stick. The part that helps you relax is realizing how old and practiced this is. Not old in the sense of one unchanging channel. The Amazon shifts constantly, but old in the sense of being a well-worn process. Water arrives, water leaves, life adjusts, life thrives. Even changes have patterns. You take a slow breath and feel how the river affects the air. Open water creates a slight space in the forest density. And the breeze here is different, still humid, but it moves more freely. It carries sound farther. A distant call travels across the water and reaches you clearer than it would through thick understory. Your ears catch it, and then your brain stops trying to identify it, because identification is an awake hobby. Listening is the sleepier one. The river also shapes light. The surface holds the last glow of twilight longer than the forest does, reflecting it upward. In the dim, your skin looks a shade cooler. The leaves at the edge gleam with water beads. The boundary between forest and river feels like a threshold between two worlds with different rules. One vertical and enclosed, the other wide and open, both humming quietly. And the river is not just a body of water. It's movement with consequences. When the water rises into the forest, it turns trunks into islands and paths into channels. It changes how animals travel. Suddenly swimming is easier than walking. Suddenly the forest floor is an underwater hallway. When the water drops, it leaves behind wet silt, fresh sandbars, little pools that trap reflections of the sky. It creates new banks and erases old ones. It makes room for seedlings in some places and sweeps them away in others. Nothing takes it personally. The system is built for this kind of rearranging. Humans, of course, are the ones who take it personally. You can almost hear the river rolling its watery eyes at anyone who thought a straight line on a map was going to tell it what to do. You keep walking, and the bank curves. The river widens in your view, and the opposite side seems farther than it should be. The surface becomes a darker sheet, and the current line out there looks stronger, as if the river is pulling itself forward with a steady, unhurried force. Somewhere in the middle, a cluster of floating plants drifts past like a tiny green raft. It spins slowly, catches a different current, and glides away as if guided by an invisible hand that's very good at its job. You stop again and just let your eyes soften, letting detail blur a little. That's when the river becomes the most relaxing, not an object to study, but a constant presence. A low, continuous sound, a slow, continuous motion, something big enough that you don't have to manage it. And in that calm, a small mystery slips in, because the river isn't only moving water, it's moving the forest's future. Every bend, every flood, Every seam of black and white water carries the next set of possibilities downstream. You don't need to chase them. You can stay here at the edge, listening to the hush, feeling the cool air rise from the surface, and sensing that the river has more to show you. Quietly, patiently, if you keep going. The river stays behind you, like a steady thought you can return to any time. But your feet keep choosing the softer darkness where the trees thicken again. The open edge fades. The breeze thins. The air becomes warmer and more intimate, as if the forest has leaned in close to tell you something interesting without waking you up. A few steps in, the ground turns quieter. Leaf litter gives under your weight with a damp, padded hush. You pass a fallen branch furred with moss, and the moss looks almost plush, like the rainforest decided cozy was a legitimate survival strategy. The scent shifts back toward green, fresh crushed leaves, wet bark, something faintly spicy like cinnamon that you can't quite locate. If your brain tries to catalog it, it will fail, and that's honestly for the best. The Amazon doesn't do single-note perfumes. It does orchestras. The canopy is still mostly a silhouette from where you stand, an overhead mass that turns twilight into a long, gentle dimming instead of sudden night. You find yourself looking up more than forward because something in you wants to understand how the forest can feel so immense while also feeling so held. The answer is above you, stacked in living layers. A rainforest isn't one surface of green. It's vertical real estate, and it's rented out to just about everyone. The understory, where you are, feels like a dim hallway lined with trunks. Light comes down in thin, broken pieces. Leaves down here tend to be broad and dark, built to catch whatever scraps of sunlight make it through. It's not dramatic. It's practical. A leaf is basically an instrument panel for sunlight, and down here the settings are tuned to low. Far overhead, though, the canopy is running a different economy, bright, busy, expensive. That's where the sunlight is strongest, the wind is more present, and the temperature swings can be sharper. It's also where much of the forest diversity is concentrated. People used to think the real action was on the ground because, well, humans love the ground. Then scientists started climbing and building platforms and cranes, and it turned out the canopy was less like a roof and more like an entire city you'd been ignoring because you didn't feel like taking the stairs. You don't have to climb tonight. You can borrow the sensation. A giant tree stands ahead, older than it looks, because old trees are good at not advertising. Its trunk rises straight and high, then vanishes into the dim green above. Around its base, roots flare outward like the folds of a skirt, creating ridges you could sit on. These buttress roots are a quiet engineering solution. Trees here often grow in soils that are nutrient-light and shallow, so spreading wide helps with stability. It's the forest's version of a broad foundation, not deeper, wider. The tree isn't showing off. It's refusing to fall over. You step closer and rest your palm on the trunk. The bark feels cool, faintly slick with moisture. There's a softness to it, but also a firmness that makes you trust it. This is the kind of tree that has heard centuries of rain and responded the same way every time, by staying. Your eyes follow the trunk upward again, and you start noticing the smaller lives attached to it. Little plants cling to the bark, some of them just mosses and tiny ferns, others more ambitious. Epiphytes live up there and on trunks, perched on branches, rooted in pockets of debris that collect where limbs meet. They aren't parasites. They don't tap the tree's food supply. They're more like tenants who bring their own groceries and pay rent in the currency of being interesting. Orchids, bromeliads, ferns, many of them spend their lives off the ground, drinking rain, catching dust, gathering nutrients from bits of leaf litter that settle into their roots. The canopy is full of these little gardens suspended in midair, each one a miniature habitat. A bromeliad can hold water between its leaves like a living cup, creating a tiny pond that supports insects and even small frogs. It's an entire world that exists because a plant decided to fold its leaves in a particular way. That level of design should honestly come with a patent, but the rainforest has never cared about human paperwork. You keep walking, and the forest opens into a natural corridor where a few trunks lean apart just enough to reveal a tall tangle of vines. Lianas, woody vines, are everywhere in the Amazon, and they're the forest's unapologetic opportunists. Instead of spending decades building a thick trunk to reach the light, a liana uses someone else's trunk as scaffolding, climbing fast, and then spreading across the canopy to claim sunlight. It's not villainous. It's efficient. It's also, if you're the tree being used as a ladder, extremely rude. Lianas twist and loop and sometimes hang in long arcs like ropes. They connect trees into a network, turning the canopy into a continuous path for animals that prefer not to come down. Monkeys, sloths, some cats, countless insects. Many of them treat the ground like a last resort. The canopy is safer, richer, and full of food. From the forest perspective, the ground is just one floor of many. You pause beneath a cluster of leaves and notice the water on them. Tiny beads sit along the edges, gathering into larger drops. Then one drop slides to the tip and falls, a clean little plunk into the leaves below. That pointed tip, often called a drip tip, is common in rainforest leaves. It helps shed water quickly, keeping the leaf surface from staying soaked too long. A constantly wet leaf is a problem. It blocks gas exchange, encourages fungus, adds weight. So rainforest leaves often have shapes that push water away efficiently, like they're always gently tidying themselves. Even a waxy sheen on many leaves is part of that. The surface repels water, so droplets can roll off rather than spread out. The forest doesn't like being wet. It manages being wet. That difference matters. There's a quiet intelligence in it. Adaptations refined over long time. Not dramatic tricks, just steady improvements that keep everything working. You stand there and imagine what the canopy must look like in daylight. An uneven skyline of crowns, some trees rising above others like towers. Those tallest ones, emergent trees, poke above the main canopy, exposed to stronger sun and wind. They could be enormous, with thick branches that spread like arms holding up the sky. Life up there is intense. Sunlight is abundant, but so is stress, heat, dryness, storms. Leaves in the upper canopy are often smaller, thicker, sometimes tougher, built to resist water loss. Lower down, leaves can be broader and thinner, made to catch dim light. It's the same idea as your eyes adjusting to a dark room. The forest adjusts too, just more permanently. The canopy also shapes the atmosphere around you in a way that's so gentle you almost miss it. This ceiling of leaves traps humidity, slows wind, and creates layers of microclimate. Down in the understory, the temperature tends to be steadier, the light dimmer, the air heavier. Up in the canopy, it can be brighter and breezier, with more temperature variation. Those differences create niches, tiny sets of conditions that certain species prefer. Multiply that by millions of branches and leaves and pockets of shade and sun, and you get a place where specialization is rewarded, which is a calm way of saying the Amazon is basically the world's biggest, most complicated apartment complex, and every tenant has a very specific preference about humidity. You move on, and the path passes beneath a tree whose branches are loaded with epiphytes. A tuft of fern spills outward like hair. Bromeliads sit like green bowls, collecting rainwater from earlier showers. A few orchids cling to the bark, their roots exposed, pale, and wiry. These roots can absorb moisture from the air, and the plants can survive without soil the way you can survive without. Actually, you can't survive without soil. You can survive without understanding soil. The rainforest plants can do both. Somewhere above, a branch creaks softly. It isn't a threatening sound. It's the sound of wood adjusting to its own weight. A leaf shivers and releases another droplet. Top, top, top. The whole forest is always dripping, always rearranging its water, always moving moisture from place to place. The sound is so consistent, it starts to feel like a metronome for your thoughts. This is where the canopy's economy becomes a comforting idea instead of an abstract one. Sunlight is the currency. Leaves are the collectors. Everything else is a marketplace built around that energy. A tree turns sunlight into sugar. That sugar builds wood, leaves, roots, flowers. Flowers attract pollinators, birds, bats, insects, who are paid in nectar or pollen. And in return, they move genetic information around like couriers. Fruits feed animals who carry seeds away, trading calories for transportation. Fallen leaves become food for fungi and microbes, who break them down into nutrients that roots can take up again. The forest isn't hoarding, it's circulating. And because this circulation happens constantly, the system feels steady even when individual lives are short. An insect might live for days. A leaf might last months. A tree might last centuries. The canopy makes all of it feel synchronized, like an orchestra where some instruments play quick notes and others hold long tones, but the music stays continuous. Your attention drifts upward again, and you try to picture yourself standing on a branch high above the ground, where the canopy opens into a wider view. From there, the forest would look like waves, green swells rolling into the distance, with occasional emergent crowns rising like islands. You'd see patches where a tree has fallen, letting light pour down, and you'd watch the forest respond immediately. Vines stretching, saplings pushing, leaves unfurling. Gaps are not disasters here. They're invitations. That idea, gaps as invitations, settles into your mind like a soft, useful thought. The rainforest isn't fragile because it's delicate. It's resilient because it's practiced to change. It has an entire toolkit for adjusting, for filling space, for turning disruption into opportunity. The canopy is the proof. It's never perfectly uniform. It's always becoming. You keep walking, and the sounds shift again. A little breeze threads through the understory, carrying a new smell, fresh, green, almost minty. It comes from crushed leaves somewhere, or from a tree releasing a faint cloud of scent. Plants do that. They're not silent furniture. They produce chemicals constantly, some to defend themselves, some to attract pollinators, some to signal other plants. The forest is full of invisible messages, and your nose is catching a few like stray radio signals. Your shoulders drop a little, and you realize you've been holding tension you didn't need. The canopy overhead feels protective, like a ceiling in a warm room. The river is still out there, moving with its slow confidence, but here the forest's vertical city surrounds you. Trunks as pillars, vines as staircases, epiphytes as hanging gardens, leaves as a million tiny solar panels quietly doing their job. And somewhere in all that green architecture, the next gentle mystery is waiting. The forest doesn't just react to rain. It helps create it, lifting water into the air with such consistency that the sky eventually answers back, as if the canopy has been whispering to the clouds the whole time. That thought about the canopy whispering to clouds doesn't leave you alone, mostly because your skin is busy agreeing with it. The air feels thicker here, not in an unpleasant way, more like the forest has added a soft blanket between you and the rest of the world. Every inhale is warm, damp, and slightly sweet, and every exhale seems to dissolve instead of disappearing. If you hold your hand out for a moment, your palm starts to feel cool, as if the air itself is willing to turn back into water the second it gets the chance. Humidity is not just it's kind of sticky. Humidity is the rainforest's hidden architecture. It's how the place stays green without looking constantly thirsty. It's how the forest makes its own weather feel familiar, like a lullaby it's been humming for thousands of years. You step under a low branch and brush a leaf by accident. It shivers once and releases a droplet that lands on your wrist, cold enough to make you blink. The leaf had been holding that water in a tiny bead, perfectly balanced at the tip, waiting for gravity to decide it had waited long enough. Everything here seems to be either absorbing water, storing water, releasing water, or quietly planning to do one of the other three. And the forest is doing something even more impressive than being wet. it's moving water upward. Trees are basically vertical plumbing with excellent branding. Roots pull water from the ground. That water travels through the trunk in a steady column, rising toward leaves like an elevator you never see. In the leaves, microscopic openings, stomata, open and close, letting gases in and out. When stomata open, water vapor escapes. That loss of water creates a pull, and the pull draws more water up from below. It's a continuous chain, a gentle tug-of-war that the tree wins by being patient and very, very tall. You can stand in one spot and feel that process without seeing it. The air around leaves is often slightly cooler and moister than the air a few steps away. Like each crown has its own tiny climate. Multiply that by billions of leaves, and you get a forest that doesn't just sit under weather. It participates in it. The weirdly comforting part is how quiet the whole operation is. No pumps, no motors, no rattling pipes. Just physics doing its slow, reliable thing, while the trees pretend they had nothing to do with it. Even at night, when it's darker and cooler, water still moves. The pace shifts, but the system doesn't switch off. The forest never really sleeps. It just changes which jobs are loud enough for you to notice. You take another breath and realize the scent in the air has shifted again. It's subtle, but it's there, the smell of damp earth, the clean mineral note that comes after water has been sitting on leaves and bark and soil. Your brain tries to call it rain smell, even if it hasn't started raining yet. That smell is part plant oils, part soil compounds, part living microbes being stirred up by moisture. Humans love that smell so much they made a word for it, because of course we did. Meanwhile, the rainforest is like, congratulations, you've invented language for the thing I do all day. You keep walking, and the canopy above you feels even more present. The leaves overlap like shingles, but not perfectly. Tiny gaps show slivers of sky. In those gaps, the darkness looks deeper, and in the deeper darkness you can see the faintest motion of mist, thin, drifting strands that move like breath. Mist is just cloud that decided to stay low, and that's the first hint of how close the forest water is to becoming sky. Here's the soft science, delivered gently. The Amazon doesn't only receive rainfall. It helps create rainfall by sending an enormous amount of water vapor back into the atmosphere. That vapor rises, cools, condenses, and can fall again as rain, sometimes not far from where it started. In many parts of the basin, a significant portion of the rain has already been rain before. Waterfall sinks, gets pulled up, gets breathed out through leaves, becomes cloud, falls again. Recycling, but make it majestic. And it doesn't happen as a dramatic, and then the forest summons the storm moment. It happens as a constant background exchange, like your heartbeat. You don't notice your heartbeat until you pay attention. The forest is the same way. Its moisture is always on the move. If you could see the atmosphere the way you can see a river, you'd notice invisible streams of vapor flowing above the canopy. Long corridors of moisture moving across the landscape. People sometimes describe these as flying rivers, which sounds like a fantasy novel, but the idea is simple. The forest releases so much water vapor that it becomes part of large-scale air currents, feeding clouds and rainfall downwind. You're standing beneath a system that doesn't just exist in one place. It influences the sky's decisions far away. You pause beside a trunk where bark has peeled slightly, revealing a smooth inner layer. A tiny line of ants moves along it like commuters who never complain. Above them, a bromeliad sits in a fork of branches, its leaves cupping a small pool of water. That little pool will evaporate too. The forest loses water to the air from everywhere. Leaves, puddles, wet bark, open water, even the damp surface of soil. Evaporation and transpiration braid together into one big process. Evapotranspiration. It sounds like something you'd learn from a board teacher with a projector that doesn't work, but out here, it's a quiet engine running the whole mood. And rain doesn't just happen because there's vapor. Vapor needs a place to gather. Clouds form when water condenses around tiny particles in the air. Dust, sea salt, smoke, pollen, microscopic fragments of life. The Amazon supplies a lot of those particles too, which is both fascinating and slightly unfair. The forest is basically providing the ingredients and setting the table. Some of the particles come from plants releasing aromatic compounds, those invisible scents you keep catching. Trees emit all sorts of organic molecules, and in the atmosphere, some of those can help form aerosols that encourage droplet formation. Some particles can be biological, bits of bacteria, spores, pollen, tiny travelers that ride air currents and can influence how and when water condenses. You're surrounded by chemistry and microbiology doing a slow dance overhead, and it's all happening without anyone asking you to understand it on the spot. The forest also makes the air behave differently. Warmth rises. Moist air rises hookup style fast because it's lighter. During the day, sunlight heats the land and canopy, and you can get powerful convection, air moving upward in columns. That upward motion carries moisture higher where it cools, and cooling air can't hold as much water vapor, so the water condenses. Clouds build. In the Amazon, those clouds can swell into towering shapes that look like they're being sculpted from inside. Then they let go. Rain arrives. It's easy to imagine rain as something that comes from above, like it's visiting. In the rainforest, rain feels more like something that belongs here, cycling through the place with calm inevitability. It's not a guest, it's family. And when the rain does come, the canopy doesn't just accept it, it edits it. A lot of rain never reaches the ground in one clean fall. Leaves catch droplets. Some of it evaporates right back into the air from leaf surfaces, returning immediately to the cycle. Some of it gathers, moves along branches, and drips down in slow, steady taps, like 100 quiet clocks ticking at different speeds. Some of it runs down trunks in thin streams, stem flow, delivering water and dissolved nutrients straight to roots. The canopy turns a downpour into a more distributed, more manageable delivery, preventing the soil from being punched by raindrops like it's taking tiny impacts nonstop. You can hear that even before you see it. The first drops don't sound like a storm. They sound like punctuation. One drop on a broad leaf, soft, flat. Another hits a cluster of smaller leaves, quick, fluttery. A third strikes a hollow and bark, deeper, like a fingertip on a drum. The soundscape changes into a layered percussion that feels oddly organized, as if every part of the forest has been assigned an instrument. Your skin cools as the air temperature eases. The moisture in the air thickens into something that feels softer, like the forest is exhaling. The smell deepens. More earth, more leaf oils released by impact, more of that clean, mineral sweetness that makes your shoulders drop. Even if you've never been here, your body knows how to relax to rain. It's ancient software, and because the forest is so good at keeping moisture close, rain here doesn't always feel like weather. Sometimes it feels like the forest is simply adjusting its settings. Humid to very humid, warm to slightly less warm, dim to dim with gleam. Leaves shine, trunks darken. The understory becomes a place of reflections, wet surfaces catching small hints of light. The rain also changes the way sound travels. It adds a steady hush that softens the edges of everything. Distant calls blur. The river's page-turning sound becomes more hidden, as if a blanket has been placed over it. In the quiet, small sounds become more noticeable. The drip-drip of leaves shedding water, the soft patter on ferns, the occasional heavier splash when a stored pocket of water dumps all at once. Those sudden dumps can feel almost comedic, like the forest waited until you walked under that exact branch. It's not personal. The forest just enjoys timing. You stand there listening, feeling the air cool and the water cycle doing its endlessly repeated loop, and something settles in you. This place is built on return. Water returns. Nutrients return. Life returns. The Amazon isn't one grand moment. It's a grand repetition. The rain eases from patter to whisper. The dripping continues longer, like the forest is unwilling to stop talking even after the sky has quieted. Somewhere above, a last cluster of leaves releases a small cascade, then settles. The air is still heavy with moisture, and the canopy feels freshly washed, darker and more solid overhead. In that softened quiet, the forest begins to reveal another layer of order. Sound as structure, calls as timing, the living clockwork that wakes and sleeps, not by schedules on phones, but by light, humidity, and the slow confidence of a world that has never needed an alarm. The dripping keeps going, long after the rain itself has stepped back, like a crowd applauding after the main act has already left the stage. Each tap on a leaf is slightly different, sharp on broad leaves, softer on moss, hollow when it finds a cupped bromeliad. The sound is steady enough that your mind starts to ride it, the way you ride the hum of a fan or distant traffic when you're trying to fall asleep. Then, as the forest settles into its damp quiet, you notice something else waking up around you. Not loud, not sudden, more like a room slowly filling with people who don't slam doors. A single bird call cuts through first, clean and bright, then stops like someone checking the acoustics. Another answers from deeper in the trees. A third, far away, adds a lower note. The calls don't overlap much at first. They're spaced out, respectful, as if each voice is feeling out where it fits. It's not a concert, it's coordination. Rainforests are often described as noisy, and they can be, but the noise is not random. The forest is full of signals, and signals work best when they don't drown each other out. So different species carve up the soundscape the way people carve up radio stations. Some call at dawn, some at dusk, some at night. Some choose high pitches that travel above the low rustle of leaves. Others choose low booms that carry through dense vegetation. Some call in bursts, others in long notes. Even insects tend to pick certain rhythms and frequencies. You stand still and let your ears adjust. When you do, you start hearing the forest timing. Light has faded, but there's still enough to shape behavior. In the Amazon, the daily rhythm is everything. Day and night are more consistent near the equator than they are in places with long summers and long winters. So the forest runs on a reliable cycle. Creatures don't need to check the calendar. They just feel the shift in light, temperature, and humidity, and their bodies respond. That's what makes the sound so soothing. It's a living clock you can listen to without needing to understand every part of it. Some of the first voices you hear belong to birds settling and repositioning, choosing safer branches, calling briefly to keep track of mates or rivals. You might catch a soft chewing sound from a nightjar-like bird farther out, or a sharper call from something that prefers the edge of the water. It's hard to identify in the dark, and the forest doesn't reward you for guessing right. It rewards you for listening. Underneath the bird calls, insect sound starts to stitch itself into the gaps. A high, steady tone from one direction, like a thin whistle held for a long time. A pulsing, electric-sounding buzz from another. Crickets, katydids, cicadas, different groups take turns, and they don't all use the same timing. Some build up as the air cools. Some fade in when humidity hits a sweet spot. Some get louder after rain because damp air can carry sound differently, and because, frankly, insects are always a little more confident when everything is wet. Sound behaves differently here than it does in open space. Dense vegetation scatters it. Leaves and trunks absorb some frequencies and reflect others. The forest is full of soft surfaces, moss, wet bark, layered leaves, which means echoes don't bounce around the same way they do in a canyon or a city street. Calls can feel close even when they aren't. They can also disappear quickly if the forest decides the angles aren't favorable. That's why so many rainforest sounds are designed to be clear and simple. Quick bursts, repeated patterns, distinct pitches. It's communication built for a crowded room. You take a step and notice how your movement changes the audio. A leaf crunch underfoot is loud here. Not because it's actually loud, but because the forest background is made of living tones that your brain treats as normal. A sudden dry snap becomes a standout. You move more carefully without thinking about it, and the forest becomes even quieter around you, as if it appreciates the effort. Somewhere off to the side, you hear a low, hollow knock, 2 or 3 beats, then silence. It could be a woodpecker-like bird or something tapping a branch. In the Amazon, some animals use drumming as well as calling because percussive sounds can cut through the green. It's like someone snapping their fingers in a crowded cafe. You don't need to see the source to understand the message. I'm here. The calm mystery is that you're hearing a map. Every call gives you a hint of distance and direction. The higher, thinner calls tend to feel like they're coming from the canopy, while lower tones can feel closer to the ground. When multiple animals respond, you can sense spacing, territories, pathways, boundaries you can't see. The forest has invisible lines, and sound is one way it draws them. And it isn't only animals making the soundscape. Leaves are part of it. Water is part of it. The river is part of it, still murmuring out there. Even wind gets a voice. When a breeze moves across the canopy, it doesn't arrive as one sound. It arrives in layers. First a faint rustle far above, then a softer, shifting closer down, then a quiet sigh through the understory. It's like hearing a wave travel through a crowd. The more you listen, the more the forest stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling like it's running a schedule with incredible confidence. Dawn is one of the biggest shifts, but dusk has its own handoff. Day animals wind down, night animals warm up. Some species are crepuscular, most active at twilight, when light is low and shadows blur. Twilight is a compromise hour, and the rainforest is full of creatures that love a good compromise. Bats, for example, tend to become more active as the light drops. You won't see them clearly yet, but you can sense them as quick flickers against the last dim sky, like tiny punctuation marks darting through air. Their world is built on sound too. Ultrasonic calls bouncing off leaves and insects, returning as a three-dimensional picture. To you, it's silent, but the air around you is full of information they can read. It's like the forest has a second soundtrack running above your hearing range, and you're only catching the bass line. You smile a little at that because it's comforting in a strange way. The forest is always more organized than you can perceive. You're not missing anything. You're just human. The Amazon doesn't demand that you access every layer. You move again, and your eyes adjust to the dark enough that you can see the forest in soft shapes. A trunk here, a fern there, the faint outline of vines. You notice how the sounds shift with your position. Step closer to a cluster of plants, and an insect tone gets louder. Step away, and it fades. It feels like walking through overlapping bubbles of sound, each bubble belonging to a specific patch of life. This is also where the rainforest's quiet rules show up. Many animals avoid calling constantly because calling makes you easier to find. In a forest full of ears, being loud is a risk. So calls are often brief and purposeful. A bird might call once to locate a mate, then stop. A frog might pulse for a while, then pause, listening for rivals. Insects might synchronize, creating waves of sound, then drop back. Even the noisy parts have structure. Frogs are especially good at this kind of pattern calling. Their voices aren't just ribbit. They're trills, clicks, chirps, peeps, each species with its own signature, often tuned to avoid confusion. Some call near water, some call from leaves, some call from tree holes. You might hear a few different frog voices tonight, layered like gentle electronic music made by nature. It's oddly modern for something that predates your entire to-do list. Your breathing slows further as the soundscape becomes steady. The rainforest is doing what good sleep audio does. Consistent texture with small variations. Enough interest to keep your brain curious. Not enough surprise to make you alert. There's a reason humans like listening to jungle sounds to relax. It's not because the jungle is simple. It's because the jungle is stable. It tells your nervous system, over and over, the world is functioning. A distant call rises again, then another answers. You don't understand the language, but you understand the effect. Connection. The forest is full of beings checking in, confirming presence, negotiating space. It's a giant living neighborhood, and the neighbors are mostly polite, except for a few insects that apparently never learned volume control. You take a few more steps, and the air carries a faint, sweet scent, like crushed flowers or ripe fruit, or both. It's not strong, but it's distinct enough to pull your attention in a new direction. Sound has been your guide, but scent is the forest's quieter messenger, and it tends to lead you into deeper mysteries. Because the Amazon isn't only coordinated by calls, it's coordinated by chemistry, by invisible trails and perfumes and warnings that travel through air and leaf and soil. You catch that scent again, and it feels like the forest has shifted from speaking out loud to whispering directly into your nose. That sweet scent hangs in the air like someone opened a tiny bottle of perfume and then immediately regretted it, because, honestly, the Amazon does not need help smelling like the Amazon. You follow it without meaning to. Your feet choose the direction the way your eyes choose a candle in a dark room. The smell isn't constant. It arrives in little waves, stronger for a breath or two, then softer, then gone, then back again, because scent in a rainforest travels like a living thing. Air moves in slow pockets here. It slides around trunks, sinks into low dips, climbs over root flares, pauses beneath dense leaves, then drifts again. The forest is full of gentle obstacles, and scent doesn't cut straight through them. It curls, it pulls, it trails off. If you could see it, it would look like ribbons and clouds threading between the trees, and you'd realize you've been walking through invisible weather. That's the first relaxing truth. The rainforest has highways you can't see, and some of the busiest ones are made of smell. You breathe in again and try to place the scent. Floral, yes, but not like a tidy bouquet. It's more complex, sweet with a green edge, almost fruity, and with something faintly fermented underneath, like overripe mango left near warm wood. That last note makes you pause, because it's oddly specific. The forest is not wasting effort. If a plant is putting a smell into the air, it's usually doing it for a reason. Plants don't have legs, which sounds like a joke until you remember how many problems legs solve. If you want a partner, you walk over. If you want help, you go ask. If you want to avoid being eaten, you run. Plants can't do any of that. So they do something else that's quietly brilliant. They speak in chemicals. Some plant chemicals stay inside. Bitter compounds, toxins, things that make leaves less appealing to chew. But many of their messages go outward into air and water and soil. In the air, the messages are often scents, volatile organic compounds, small molecules that easily evaporate and drift. You catch them as fragrance, but to the forest, they're information. Who's blooming? Who's injured? Who's ready to be pollinated? Who's warning the neighborhood? Who's trying to lure you into being a delivery service? You step closer to where the scent is strongest and realize it's coming from a cluster of pale flowers high on a branch. You can't see details clearly, only a soft glow of petals in the dim, but you can see the shape, open, inviting, quietly flashy against the dark leaves. The flowers aren't shouting with color the way they might in a sunny meadow. They're doing something more effective for a dim forest, broadcasting a smell that can travel around obstacles. That scent is a beacon, and the audience isn't you. You're just the lucky bystander who gets to feel like you've wandered into a secret. At night, scent becomes even more important. Colors are harder to read, but moths and beetles and bats can follow odor plumes the way you follow a warm bakery smell down a street. A flower's perfume can guide a pollinator through the maze of trunks and vines, right to the exact spot where pollen waits like a tiny package. And here's where it gets strangely soothing. Many plants aim their perfume at a specific partner. Not any insect, please. More like you. The one with the right size body and the right habits and the right nightly route. Some flowers open at dusk, release their strongest scent at night, and then close again by morning. They're not being dramatic. They're saving energy and focusing their invitation. You stand there, letting the smell wash over you, and somewhere above, a moth flickers by, attracted to the same signal your nose is enjoying. You can't hear it, but you can imagine its antennae reading the air like fingertips. Insects can be astonishingly sensitive to certain chemicals, able to detect tiny concentrations, able to distinguish one blend from another, able to follow a gradient through still air. Your nose can tell sweet. The moth's nose can tell this exact flower from this exact direction right now. A second moth appears, then another, moving with that soft, jittery confidence of creatures that don't pay rent and therefore have no stress. One pauses near the flowers, and you see a brief shimmer of wings. It doesn't land right away. It hovers, tastes the air, adjusts. The flower isn't just a pretty shape. It's a station in a nightly network. Some flowers do something even more cheeky. They mimic smells that aren't flowers at all. Certain plants can produce odors that resemble fermenting fruit or fungus or even decay. Not because they're unpleasant, but because they're targeting pollinators that are drawn to those smells. A beetle that likes ripe fruit will follow a ripe fruit scent. A fly that's attracted to certain funky odors will follow those too. The plant is basically saying, I made the exact smell you like. Please bring me pollen. It's manipulation, but with better manners than most advertising. Your brain tries to label that as trickery, then realizes trickery implies a moral code, and plants do not subscribe to your moral newsletter. They subscribe to survival. The smell shifts again as you move, becoming less sweet and more sharp, like crushed leaves. That sharpness carries another layer of meaning. Plants don't only send invitations. They also send alarms. When an herbivore chews a leaf, the plant responds with chemistry. Some of those chemicals make the leaf tougher or less palatable. Some are signals that travel through the plant to warn other leaves. And some are released into the air as scent, an SOS that can reach neighboring plants. Nearby plants might prime their defenses, essentially getting ready for trouble before trouble arrives. The forest is not just reacting, it's anticipating. Even better, some of those distress scents can attract the enemies of the herbivore. A caterpillar starts chewing, and the plant releases a chemical blend that calls in parasitic wasps that lay eggs on caterpillars. It's a weird sentence to say in a sleepy video, but notice the tone. No gore, just strategy. A plant can't swat a bug away, so it hires a specialist. It's outsourcing, rainforest style. You stand still and let that idea settle. The forest has a security system made of smell. Not sirens and blinking lights. Just invisible messages moving through warm air, guiding the right helpers to the right place. And it's not only plants. Fungi and microbes and animals all use chemical signals. The rainforest is full of scent trails, territorial markers, attraction cues, warnings. If you had the nose of a dog, honestly, if you had the nose of a moth, you'd be overwhelmed. Every step would be stepping into a layered conversation. The reason it feels peaceful to you is because you can't hear most of it, the way a calm room feels calmer when you can't understand the language being spoken in the corner. Humidity makes this chemical world feel even more intimate. Moist air can hold scent molecules and keep them from dispersing too quickly. After rain, odors can intensify as wet surfaces release compounds. Damp leaves and bark act like scent reservoirs, absorbing and then re-releasing smells. That's why you keep catching waves of fragrance instead of one steady stream. The forest is breathing scent in and out, storing it, releasing it, remixing it. You walk past a tree with a rough patch of bark, and it has a faint resin smell, sharp, clean, almost medicinal. Resin is another chemical story. It can seal wounds, repel insects, protect against fungi. Some resins are aromatic enough that humans have collected them for perfumes and incense, which is classic human behavior. Find a plant defense system and turn it into a luxury candle. And as you move, you notice how certain smells seem to come from above rather than around you. That's the canopy again, the city overhead broadcasting in all directions. Flowers bloom up there, fruit ripens up there, leaves get damaged up there, and the air carries those messages down. You're walking under a ceiling that's constantly releasing information. The sweet scent returns, stronger, and then, almost comically, another smell joins it. A warm, ripe fruit note that makes your mouth water just a little. You don't see fruit, but you can imagine it somewhere, hidden in leaves. Fruit doesn't smell good for your benefit either. It's advertising. A ripe fruit is a signboard saying, "I'm ready." Mammals and birds and fish in flooded forests can follow that sign, eat the fruit, and then carry seeds away. The plant gets transportation. The animal gets calories. Everyone pretends this is just a casual snack situation, but it's actually logistics. Some fruit scents are timed. Day-fruiting plants can lean into bright, fresh odors that pair well with daylight and birds. Night-fruiting plants can produce stronger, muskier scents that travel farther in dark, humid air, aimed at bats and nocturnal mammals. A bat might navigate by sound, but scent helps it find a specific tree among thousands. A fruiting tree becomes a midnight diner with its lights on, and the bats are regulars. You catch a faint rustle above, then a quick flutter. Something moved, maybe a bat, maybe a bird shifting, maybe a leaf dropping water. Your eyes can't quite track it, but your ears catch the motion. That's another gentle truth. The Amazon is always multitasking. Even in stillness, there are schedules, feeding routes, pollination rounds, seed deliveries. Smell ties them together quietly. The forest chemistry can also shape who grows where. Some plants release compounds that discourage other plants from sprouting too close, a kind of invisible spacing rule. It's not mean, it's practical. When resources are limited, light, nutrients, space, plants benefit from keeping a little breathing room. The Amazon is crowded, but it's not careless about boundaries. You slow down because the scent becomes so interesting that your brain tries to stay awake for it, like a cat pretending it wasn't sleepy a second ago. The trick is to let the curiosity be soft. You don't need to solve it. You just let it be a mystery that smells good. A breeze threads through again, and the scent shifts to something cooler, like crushed mint and wet citrus peel. That might be a tree emitting aromatic oils, or a cluster of leaves brushed by an animal. It might be a plant doing chemical housekeeping. Many rainforest plants produce strong-smelling compounds, terpenes, and other aromatics that can deter herbivores or reduce infection. To you, it's pleasant. To an insect, it might be a "please don't eat me" sign written in a language you can't read. And because you can't read it, you get to enjoy it as atmosphere. The longer you stand in this invisible perfume network, the more you realize the forest isn't just a place you look at. It's a place that reaches you. It touches your lungs with moisture. It taps your skin with droplets. It fills your ears with patterned sound. It fills your nose with messages. A gentle, sleepy sarcasm slips into your mind. Humans act like they're the communication experts, then walk into a rainforest and immediately miss 90% of the conversation. It's fine. The forest isn't offended. It just keeps talking. The scent begins to thin as you move away from the flowering branch, and another smell takes its place. Earthier, warmer, like damp soil mixed with something faintly sweet. It's the smell of life happening close to the ground. Leaves breaking down, roots breathing, tiny organisms doing their quiet work. You don't go deep into that yet. You just sense it as a transition, a hint that the next layer of rainforest order isn't only in the air above you. It's also in the small, busy societies under your feet and along the bark, creatures that navigate by scent as confidently as you navigate by sight. You take one more slow breath, and the last trace of floral sweetness lingers at the back of your throat like a whisper. The forest's invisible highways keep flowing around you, guiding pollinators, warning neighbors, offering invitations. And somewhere nearby, a line of tiny travelers is already following a chemical trail with the focus of a commuter who absolutely cannot be late. That commuter line you sensed a moment ago comes into focus as you step around a buttress root and lower your gaze. There it is, an ant trail thin but unmistakably intentional, flowing over bark ridges and leaf edges like a living thread. They move in two directions at once, a steady back and forth that makes the forest feel suddenly organized. Not in a stiff, clipboard way, more in a this place runs itself way. You crouch, careful not to crush anything important, and watch them pass. Some ants are empty-mouthed and fast, like they're late for a meeting that was scheduled by a very strict manager. Others carry tiny loads that look like crumbs of leaf, bits of something pale, or even a droplet of sweet liquid held like a fragile jewel. None of them pause to admire you. The Amazon does not revolve around your curiosity, and the ants are a great reminder of that. The air still smells faintly of damp green and leftover flowers, and it makes sense here because sin is basically the ants' entire internet. You can't see what they're saying to each other, but you can see the results. The smooth coordination, the way they choose paths, the way a few ants slow down to touch antennae and then continue as if they just exchanged a quick update. Ants run the rainforest in the same quiet way the river runs the floodplain. Patiently, constantly, without needing applause. You follow the trail with your eyes and notice it doesn't wander randomly. It has purpose. It curves around obstacles as if mapped. It crosses a fallen twig at exactly the easiest spot. It splits briefly, 2 lanes, then merges again. A small detour loops around a wet patch, then rejoins the main flow. This is what happens when millions of tiny decisions stack into a system. No one ant has a master plan. The trail itself becomes the plan. If you stay still long enough, you start to notice something almost hypnotic about their movement. Each ant is small, but the stream is continuous. It feels like looking at water flowing, just segmented into little legs. You shift a bit, and your knee brushes a leaf. The ants react instantly, not with panic, more like a collective recalculation. A few pause, a couple turn, one runs back down the line, and within seconds a traffic pattern changes slightly, as if the whole system shrugged and said, "Okay, new obstacle noted." It's a soft lesson in resilience. The rainforest doesn't demand perfection. It thrives on adjustment. The trail leads to a tree trunk that's scarred with thin grooves, and as you look closer, you see more ants moving vertically, up and down, like elevators in a high-rise. Some disappear into a crack. Others emerge. The trunk isn't just a trunk. It's infrastructure. Some rainforest ants live in nests tucked into soil, leaf litter, or rotting wood. Others build nests in trees, woven from leaves, formed from chewed plant fibers, hidden in cavities. And some form partnerships so close they feel like deals negotiated in secret. Certain plants grow hollow thorns or swollen stems that provide ants with housing. In exchange, ants protect the plant from herbivores and even from competing plants that try to grow too close. It's not friendship. It's a contract. The rainforest runs on contracts. You can't see the whole colony, of course, but you can sense it behind the surface bustle. Chambers, tunnels, storage, nurseries. An ant colony is a single organism made of many bodies, a distributed mind that never sits down. If that sounds unsettling, it becomes calming when you realize the mind is mostly focused on practical things. Gather food, tend young, maintain home, defend boundaries, repair damage. Honestly, it's the kind of routine humans claim to hate and then secretly crave. You follow a different line and find the famous workers you've heard about, the ones that look like they're carrying pieces of green confetti. Leafcutter ants. Their trail is wider, busier, and somehow more dramatic because the loads are so obvious. Fresh leaf segments held overhead like tiny flags. You watch a worker climb over a root flare with a leaf piece bigger than its body, and it's hard not to respect the confidence. That ant did not wake up today thinking small. Leafcutter ants are often described as farmers, and for once the nickname is actually accurate. They don't eat those leaf pieces the way you'd expect. They carry them back to the nest, chew them into pulp, and use that pulp to grow a specific fungus. The fungus is the real food. The colony tends it, weeds out contaminants, and feeds it fresh plant material. It's agriculture practiced underground in the dark, with a consistency that would embarrass most of us who can't keep a single houseplant alive, even with reminders. You imagine the nest beneath your feet, chambers full of that cultivated fungus, tended like gardens, workers maintaining humidity, others removing waste, others caring for larvae. It's an entire city running in the soil. Ant cities are not metaphorical here. They're real, engineered spaces with ventilation and zoning. Ventilation matters because the colony is alive in a way that produces heat and carbon dioxide. Thousands, sometimes millions, of ants breathing and working in enclosed tunnels need airflow. Some nests have structures and openings that help regulate that flow, using temperature differences and wind in simple, elegant ways. The ants may not know the word physics, but they live inside it like experts. Air moves where it can, and the colony shapes where it can. That's the soothing part. Even the most complex behaviors often come from small rules repeated. Move this. Follow that scent. If the air is too damp, adjust the openings. If mold appears where it shouldn't, remove it. If a trail is efficient, reinforce it with more scent. Ant intelligence isn't about one ant being brilliant. It's about a system being reliable. You lift your gaze and see termites too, subtler at first, but then impossible to unsee. A mound rises nearby, low and rounded, blending with leaf litter and roots. It looks like a bit of earth that decided to become architecture. Termites are often mistaken for ants, but they're their own world, their own ancient lineage, their own quiet genius. Where ants are restless movers, termites feel like builders. Many termites eat dead wood, cellulose. And that sounds simple until you realize how hard cellulose is to digest. Termites make it possible by hosting microbes in their guts that break down the tough plant fibers. It's another rainforest partnership. Tiny organisms living inside other tiny organisms, turning fallen trees into usable energy. The forest has layers within layers, like a story told inside a story. Termites also reshape the soil. They drag plant material underground, mix it, deposit it, aerate it, redistribute nutrients. Their mounds can influence water flow and plant growth around them, creating little hotspots of fertility. An old mound can be a landmark for certain plants, a subtle change in the landscape that affects who thrives there. The rainforest isn't one uniform carpet. It's a patchwork, and tiny engineers help stitch the patches. You step closer to the mound and notice small openings, vents, placed like little pores. The mound isn't just a pile. It's a climate machine. Termites can regulate temperature and humidity inside, keeping conditions stable enough for their colony and for the fungi some species cultivate. The mound shape, the tunnel patterns, the placement of vents, these can work with sun and wind to maintain a steady internal environment. In a forest where outside conditions shift between hot, wet, and hotter wet, stability is valuable. It's oddly comforting to realize how many creatures spend their lives building stability. A soft rustle runs through the leaf litter, and for a moment you think it's just water dripping, but then you see another movement, a different kind of ant line, faster, more purposeful, less like commuting and more like a tide. Army ants. They don't build permanent nests in the same way. They move, they swarm, they form living bridges with their bodies. They organize like a traveling force of nature. If you're imagining chaos, you're picturing it wrong. Even this has rules. The column flows around obstacles and reforms. Some ants act like scouts. Others carry brood. The whole thing shifts as if it has one shared intention. And the rainforest responds to their movement like a neighborhood responding to a parade. Some insects flee. Some animals follow at a safe distance, taking advantage of prey flushed out by the swarm. Birds can shadow army ants for easy meals, not because the ants feed the birds, but because the ants change the behavior of everything in their path. The Amazon is full of these chain reactions, small forces pushing, other forces responding. The result is not constant violence, it's constant adaptation. A moving ant swarm is like a weather front. You don't hate it, you just respect it and step aside. You stay still and let the line pass, feeling the faintest vibration through the ground as thousands of legs cross leaf litter. It's a strange sensation, like the forest has a pulse you can feel in your bones if you pay attention. The sound of it is soft, almost like dry rain. The smell around it shifts too, a faint, sharp edge, the chemical signature ants carry with them. It's not unpleasant. It's just specific. The forest is full of specific. In the dim light, you notice how ants interact with other creatures you might have overlooked. A small green insect sits on a stem, and an ant pauses, taps it with antennae, and then receives a tiny droplet of sugary liquid. That's another partnership. Some insects feed on plant sap and excrete a sweet liquid, and ants protect them in exchange for the sugar. It's like the ants have their own moving cafeterias. Again, not friendship. Logistics. You think back to the perfume in the air earlier, the invisible trails and messages. Ant pheromones are that idea made visible through behavior. They lay chemical trails to food, to water, to nest. Strong trails get reinforced. Weak trails fade. It's a self-editing map, constantly updated. If a food source disappears, the trail fades, and the colony reallocates. No meeting required. No arguments about spreadsheets. You follow one trail until it leads to a patch of fallen fruit on the ground, soft, fragrant, already being claimed by fungi and tiny insects. Ants are there too, sampling, carrying bits, licking sugary juices. You watch them work and realize they aren't just taking. They're moving matter. They're participating in decomposition and recycling, speeding up the process by breaking things apart and transporting nutrients. In a rainforest, where everything wants to grow, recycling has to be fast. Ants and termites help keep the cycle from stalling. Even seeds can be part of the story. Some seeds hitch rides indirectly, carried with fruit bits, dragged accidentally, relocated by foraging. Some plants even attach little fatty structures to seeds that ants find irresistible, encouraging ants to carry seeds to safer spots. The plant gets dispersal. The ant gets food. The seed gets placed in a pocket of soil that might be protected, might be nutrient-rich. It's a quiet way the forest spreads itself. You straighten slowly, letting your knees rest, and you feel the forest scale again, but in a different way than the river or the canopy. This scale is microscopic and massive at the same time. Each ant is tiny. Each termite is tiny. But their collective work shapes the forest floor, the soil structure, the nutrient flow, the distribution of life. The rainforest grandeur isn't only in tall trees and wide rivers. It's also in busy little societies running unseen beneath your feet. A last line of leafcutters passes by, their green flags bobbing gently as they climb over roots and vanish into the dark entrance of their world. You watch until the final worker disappears, and for a moment the forest feels even quieter because you've just noticed one of its strongest engines, and engines are calming when they're not yours. The air shifts again, carrying something earthy and rich, the kind of smell that comes from life breaking down and becoming life again. That scent feels like an invitation downward, toward the layer where the forest keeps its oldest secrets, where leaves become soil, where fungi thread through darkness, where the ground itself is a library of quiet transformations waiting for you to place your hand on the page. That earthy richness stays with you as you move forward, but your attention lifts again, drawn by a soft shifting above, just a hint of motion, as if the canopy is rearranging itself one leaf at a time. The forest floor is busy, yes, but the real calm trick of the Amazon is that it holds entire lives in places you'd never think to look unless something nudges your eyes upward. A branch high overhead has a shape that doesn't quite match the others. It's thicker in one spot, like a knot of moss, but it moves slowly enough that your brain almost refuses to register it as movement. You blink, and the shape shifts again, a deliberate, unhurried adjustment. Then you see it, a sloth, folded into the crook of a limb like the branch grew a sleepy elbow. Sloths don't look like they belong in a hurry, and that's the point. Their whole strategy is to live at a pace that makes the forest forget they're there. They eat leaves, which are not exactly a thrilling food choice unless you've made peace with disappointment. Leaves are low in calories and often full of defensive chemicals. A sloth response is simple and genius. Do less. Digest slowly. Move slowly. Save energy like it's the last bar of Wi-Fi in a blackout. If you watch long enough, you can see the logic in every tiny motion. The sloth reaches for a cluster of leaves with a lazy stretch that looks like it's been rehearsed for comfort. It pulls them in, chews without drama, and settles again. It doesn't need a sprint. It doesn't need a leap. It needs to not be noticed, and in a forest where attention can be dangerous, that is a very respectable career choice. You notice something else too. The sloth's fur looks slightly greenish in patches. That isn't a fashion statement. It's algae. In the damp Amazon air, algae can grow on sloth fur, giving it a muted camouflage that blends into mossy branches. The sloth becomes part of the canopy's texture, another fuzzy patch in the green city overhead. It's a quiet collaboration between mammals and microscopic life, the kind of partnership the rainforest treats as normal. Your breathing stays slow as you watch, because the sloth doesn't allow urgency in the room. It's like being near someone who refuses to check their phone and somehow makes you feel healthier for it. You keep walking beneath that branch, and the forest feels subtly different. Not louder or scarier, just more aware. In the Amazon, predators don't announce themselves with theme music. They don't need to. They operate on the same rules as everything else. Blend in, conserve energy, strike only when the odds are good. The forest's most successful hunters aren't the ones that chase. They're the ones that wait. Somewhere deeper in the trees, a shadow shifts against bark. It's not a big movement, just a change in pattern, dark spots aligning with darker leaves, a smooth shape pressed close to a trunk. Your eyes can't lock onto it, but the feeling that something is there lingers like a whisper. Jaguars are the kind of animal people love to imagine as constant motion. Stalking, leaping, drama. In reality, a jaguar's power is often expressed through stillness. A big cat that spends time moving carefully is a big cat saving calories. In a rainforest where heat and humidity make long chases expensive, efficiency matters. You don't see a jaguar clearly. That would be a different kind of night, and it would come with a different heart rate. What you do see is how the forest makes a jaguar possible. The dappled light and shadow create perfect camouflage. Leaves break up outlines. Lianas provide quiet pathways. The canopy and understory offer cover. A jaguar fits into this place like a thought you almost remember, never fully visible, always present. If you did see one, the most striking thing might not be its size, but its calm. Cats move like they're already certain the world will make room for them, and a rainforest usually does. Jaguars are built for power in close quarters, strong bodies, thick limbs, a bite designed to end decisions quickly. But you don't need the details that raise your pulse. The soothing fact is simpler. Jaguars are not wasteful. They don't hunt for sport. They hunt when they need to, and then they return to stillness. A jaguar can spend long hours resting, conserving energy, listening to the forest's layered sound the same way you are, only with better hearing and fewer existential thoughts. You listen again, and the forest's chorus continues, steady and patterned. A frog calls. Insects pulse. A distant bird offers a brief note. Everything sounds normal, which is oddly reassuring because it means whatever is moving in the shadows is moving the way it should, quietly, invisibly, as part of the system. Your feet drift toward a faint opening where the air feels cooler. Water is nearby again, not the wide river edge, but a smaller channel or backwater hidden under leaves. You can smell it, a clean, wet note, and that faint tea-like scent from tannins. The ground dips, and you see the dark surface of a narrow stream. So still it reflects leaves like a mirror. Water is a different kind of hunting ground, and it comes with different rules. Movement can be seen easily on a smooth surface. Sound travels differently. scent behaves differently. And some hunters have learned to use water the way jaguars use shadow, as cover. A ripple appears near the far bank, subtle as a breath. Something just beneath the surface slides forward and the water barely reacts. You don't see the body. You see the effect. A soft, V-shaped disturbance, then nothing. It could be a fish. It could be a turtle. It could be a caiman moving like a floating log with intent. Caimans are crocodilian relatives, and the Amazon has them. The word alone can make people tense up because humans are extremely dramatic about reptiles that mind their own business. The truth is that caimans, like most predators, are focused on energy. They don't want to burn calories unless there's a clear payoff. In warm, slow water, a caiman can hold still with only eyes and nostrils above the surface, reading the world while looking like nothing at all. It's the stillness that's most impressive. Muscles relaxed, body buoyed by water, heat managed by the environment. A caiman becomes part of the stream's furniture. And that stillness is not laziness, it's strategy. Waiting is often the smartest move in a place where sprinting is expensive and visibility is limited. You crouch at the bank again, careful with your weight, and watch the surface. A small insect lands and creates tiny rings. A leaf drops and makes a wider circle. The stream is a quiet display of cause and effect. If a larger ripple appears, you notice it immediately, not because it's threatening, but because your mind is calm enough to observe. A fish breaks the surface briefly with a soft gulp. That's another calm detail. Many Amazon waters can be low in oxygen at times, especially in warm, still areas rich with decaying plant matter. Some fish have adapted in clever ways, gulping air, using special organs, tolerating low oxygen better than you ever could. The forest and water are constantly negotiating chemistry, and life adjusts with an elegance that doesn't need to show off. You shift your gaze along the waterline and notice roots dipping into the stream, creating little shaded pockets. Those pockets are where small creatures hide and where hunters patrol. In the Amazon, river hunters can mean many things: fish, reptiles, mammals, even birds that spear or scoop. The most soothing truth is that the hunting is often quiet, precise, and rare compared to the amount of waiting. Think of it like this. You see a single ripple and your imagination writes a whole action movie. The stream is mostly just being a stream. It carries leaves. It holds reflections. It cools the air. It provides a corridor for movement. The drama, when it happens, is brief. The rest is patience. You stand again and keep moving, leaving the stream behind as the understory thickens. A vine swings slightly, and you look up to see another slow-moving shape, something heavier than a bird, calmer than a monkey. It's another sloth, or maybe the same one from a different angle, but this one is lower, closer. It reaches for a liana with a careful grip, moving one arm at a time, like it's testing the idea of gravity. You watch the fingers curl, the body shift, the fur catch a droplet of water and hold it. Sloths are not alone up there. The canopy has monkeys that move like quick thoughts, fast, curious, always scanning. But even monkeys, with all their energy, still follow the rainforest economy. Don't waste movement. Leap only when needed. Travel on routes that minimize risk. Eat what's available. Rest when full. The forest is not a treadmill. It's a place where efficiency looks like wisdom. And that's the thread tying the slow giants and the quiet predators together. Energy. In a rainforest, energy arrives as sunlight, becomes sugar, becomes leaves and fruit and insects and flesh. But energy is never free. Moving costs energy. Digesting costs energy. Staying cool costs energy. Finding food costs energy. The smartest strategy often isn't be the fastest. It's be the least wasteful. Sloths have chosen the low-energy life so completely that their bodies reflect it. Slow metabolism, slow digestion, a lifestyle built around not needing much. Jaguars have chosen a different path. Powerful bursts when needed, long periods of rest, a body built for decisive moments rather than marathons. Caimans, In water, choose stillness and positioning. Even many fish choose routes and times that reduce effort, riding currents, using flooded forests as seasonal buffets. Your mind starts to mirror that economy. You stop trying to collect the rainforest like it's a checklist. You let it come to you. A sound here, a scent there, a slow movement above, a ripple in the water. The Amazon reveals itself through hints, and hints are perfect for sleep because they keep curiosity alive without demanding action. A faint rustle in the leaves to your right resolves into something small, a creature slipping away, unseen. You don't chase it. You don't need to know. The forest isn't withholding, it's simply full. There's always more happening than you can witness, and that's comforting. It means the world is still turning even when you close your eyes. You walk on, and the canopy overhead thickens again into a darker ceiling. The river's distant hush returns faintly, like the page-turning sound from earlier, reminding you of the larger pulse line that runs through everything here. Above, the sloth settles back into stillness. Somewhere unseen, a jaguar remains a shadow among shadows, calm and patient. In water pockets, quiet hunters float and wait. The forest holds them all without fuss. And as you move deeper, another layer of wonder begins to tug at you. Not the big predators or the slow giants, but the hidden world suspended above your head in cups of leaves and tree hollows, where tiny ponds form in the canopy and whole communities live like they're floating in the air. The feeling of worlds floating above you keeps growing the farther you go, until the canopy stops being a ceiling and starts feeling like a second landscape. One you can't walk on, but one that's still very much alive and busy. Your eyes keep lifting almost automatically because the forest has trained you already. The obvious things are down here, and the strange, delicate miracles hide just out of reach. A branch fork high overhead catches a faint gleam of moisture. Something up there holds water the way a bowl holds soup, except the bowl is made of leaves, and the soup is rain that forgot it was supposed to fall all the way to the ground. You stare a little longer, and the shape becomes clearer. Thick, curved leaves rising in a rosette, hugging a dark center. A bromeliad, one of the rainforest's quiet geniuses. Bromeliads don't look like a big deal at first, which is their best trick. They're not towering. They're not flashy like a flower that wants applause. They're just arranged, leaves overlapping in a way that collects water. A natural cup, a living reservoir. And when rain runs down the canopy, or when the air is heavy enough to bead moisture on everything, bromeliads gather it and keep it. The forest already taught you that it edits rainfall. This is rainfall editing turned into an apartment building. Inside those leaf cups, rainwater sits for days, sometimes weeks, depending on how often it rains and how quickly the water evaporates. Leaves and dust fall in, tiny pieces of bark, pollen, insect bodies. The water turns into a dark little tea. Not dirty, just seasoned. It becomes a soup of nutrients in a place where nutrients are always being recycled fast. That little cup is called a tank sometimes, and it's not a metaphor. It holds enough water to support life. Not just one creature passing through, whole communities, mosquito larvae wriggling like commas in a sentence, beetles that treat the water surface like a skating rink, tiny crustaceans in some places, little specks that move with sudden bursts, microbes doing their invisible work, breaking down whatever drops in. You can't see most of that from where you stand, and that's part of the wonder. The rainforest is full of important things that are too small to show off. Your mind goes back to the ants for a second, tiny workers shaping soil and nutrients. Bromeliads do something similar, but in the air. They create pockets where water and nutrients collect, where organisms can live without needing a pond or a stream. In a forest where the ground can flood and dry and flood again. And where the canopy is a busy place full of sunlight and wind, having a stable little reservoir up in the branches is like owning beachfront property. Except the beach is a leaf, and the property tax is being eaten by something with mandibles. A faint drip lands on your shoulder. Cold. It slides down your arm in a slow line and disappears into your sleeve, and you almost laugh because the forest is still doing that gentle prank where it chooses the exact moment you relax to remind you it's full of water. The bromeliad overhead holds its water calmly, though, like it's above the drama. A small frog call sounds somewhere nearby, soft, rounded, and your attention sharpens in that sleepy way that doesn't feel like effort. Frogs belong to water. That's the rule you learned as a kid. The rainforest likes rules because it likes breaking them politely. Some frogs use bromeliads as nurseries. They lay eggs in damp spots, and later their tadpoles develop in those tiny leaf pools, safe from bigger predators you'd find in rivers and ponds. Certain rainforest frogs even carry tadpoles, one by one, up into the canopy and place them in different bromeliads, like a careful parent distributing snacks across multiple shelves so one hungry sibling doesn't eat everything at once. It's the kind of behavior that sounds made up until you realize the rainforest has had a long time to experiment. You picture that climb, a frog moving up a trunk slick with moisture, finding a specific bromeliad by memory and scent, lowering a tadpole into a cup of rainwater, then leaving it there in a floating cradle. A tiny life beginning in a bowl of leaves high above the ground. The idea lands softly in your mind and stays. That's the rainforest's magnificence, not only in how big it is, but in how it stacks life into layers, then hides entire dramas inside a single plant. You walk beneath another tree, and you notice a dark hollow in the trunk, an opening where a branch once grew or where decay carved a pocket. Rainwater can collect in these too. Tree holes become tiny ponds. Sometimes they're shallow, sometimes deeper. They can hold water long enough for insects to breed, for microbes to thrive, for small creatures to drink. These little reservoirs are less tidy than bromeliads, more like natural cups chipped out of wood, but they still do the same thing. They create water where water didn't exist. And because the rainforest has so many trees, it has so many cups. Even in a place famous for rain, the canopy can be surprisingly thirsty. Sun and wind up there can dry things out quickly between showers. That's why these pocket waters matter. They're not just curiosities. They're part of the canopy's survival kit. An animal living high above the ground can find water without climbing down. A pollinator can drink and keep going. A tiny insect can live its entire early life in a leaf pool, emerge as an adult, and spend the rest of its life never touching the forest floor. Your eyes track upward again, trying to spot more tanks, more hollows, more hints of that hidden aquatic world. A liana hangs like a rope, glossy with moisture. In the dim, it looks like a pathway for the imagination. You can almost see the canopy from up there, the way it would feel to stand on a thick branch and look out across an ocean of leaves. The forest would stretch in every direction, and between those leaves would be little gleaming points. Water held in plant cups, water caught in bark folds, water pooled in hollows. Tiny mirrors reflecting tiny pieces of sky. The thought is calming because it makes the forest feel self-sufficient. It doesn't rely on one river or one pond. It sprinkles water storage everywhere, like it's always planning ahead. A soft movement above pulls your attention sideways. Something small scurries along a branch, too quick to identify in the low light, then stops near a bromeliad and vanishes into the leaves. Maybe a lizard, maybe a small, tree-dwelling frog, maybe an insect that knows this plant is a water source. The canopy is full of creatures that treat bromeliads like public fountains. You imagine what the water inside those cups is like. It isn't clean drinking water in the human sense. It can be acidic, especially when tannins and decaying leaves steep in it. It can be low in oxygen. It can be full of tiny predators and scavengers. And yet life adapts to it anyway, because life in the Amazon adapts to everything. That water becomes an ecosystem with its own food web. Leaves fall in, break down, become nutrients. Microbes feed on that. Small larvae feed on microbes. Predatory larvae feed on smaller larvae. Some creatures graze on algae films. Others filter tiny particles. Everything is scaled down, but the structure is the same as a big pond. Energy comes in, gets transformed, passes through bodies, and returns to the cycle. It's like the Amazon is running 1,000 miniature versions of itself in the canopy. Tiny forests inside leaf cups, each with its own little economy. Your mind briefly reaches for the word microcosm, then decides it sounds like you're about to sell a documentary series and pulls back. The feeling matters more than the label anyway. The feeling is that the rainforest is endlessly nested. Big things hold small things. Small things hold smaller things. And you, standing on the ground, are only catching the shadows of those worlds. The canopy also collects something else, soil, but not the kind you're used to. Up in the branches, organic matter accumulates. Dead leaves, twigs, dust, insect droppings, bits of bark caught in forks and crevices. Over time, it forms dark, crumbly pockets, sometimes called canopy soil, like tiny gardens floating in midair. Roots from epiphytes grow into it. Fungi thread through it. Microbes live in it. Little insects burrow through it. It's a suspended compost pile that never touches the ground, which means the canopy isn't only a place where leaves catch sunlight. It's also a place where nutrients get stored and reused, a place where decomposition happens above your head, a place where the forest floor's library of decay has a satellite branch office. You walk a little farther, and the air feels cooler again, as if the forest just opened a vent somewhere. The soundscape shifts too. Insects pulse in a different rhythm. A frog call comes from higher than you'd expect, proving again that water habitats aren't only down low. Something drips steadily in the distance, like a slow faucet. It might be a bromeliad overflowing, releasing a thin stream down a trunk. That overflow matters. Water held in plant cups doesn't always stay there. It spills. It drips. It runs down bark. It carries dissolved nutrients with it, tiny contributions to the forest's internal circulation. The canopy is constantly raining on itself, even when the sky isn't, sending little nutrient-rich trickles down toward roots. The forest is always feeding itself, always redistributing, always turning what falls into something useful. You pause under a branch and watch a droplet form at the tip of a leaf. It grows, trembles, then falls. Simple, but the droplet isn't just water. It might carry microscopic bits of pollen. It might carry tiny nutrients leached from leaves. It might carry spores. It might carry messages in the chemical sense. Each droplet is a tiny delivery. Everything in the Amazon feels like delivery. A distant rustle suggests something larger moving high above, maybe a monkey shifting on a route only it understands. Monkeys often use canopy pathways that link fruiting trees like stations on a subway line. When fruit ripens, the canopy becomes a map of opportunity, and animals travel those routes again and again. Bromeliads and tree holes become water stops along the way. You can almost picture the canopy as a city at night. Dark streets of branches, occasional glints of wet leaves, little reservoirs hidden in green rosettes, commuters moving quietly through the shadows. It's not chaotic. It's alive in a way that feels strangely civilized. Your attention drifts back to the water cups because they're the most mysterious part of this whole layer. They're so small, and yet they hold so much life. They're so temporary, and yet they appear everywhere. They're hidden, but they're essential. And the best part, maybe the most relaxing part, is that this hidden water world isn't built with force. It's built with shape. A leaf curve, a branch fork, a hollow in wood. The rainforest uses geometry the way it uses chemistry. Gently, constantly, with no wasted drama. You start moving again, and the canopy seems to press closer, as if you're walking beneath a ceiling made of overlapping bowls and pockets. Somewhere above, a bromeliad sits heavy with rainwater, holding a tiny pond where larvae wiggle, microbes work, and maybe a tadpole rests in a world no larger than your two hands. The thought follows you like a soft lantern, lighting the forest with quiet wonder. And under that wonder another deeper pull begins to form. Not upward this time, but downward toward the ground layer you've been smelling all along. The sweet perfumes and the leaf-cut ponds are enchanting, but every drop and every fallen leaf eventually meets the same place. The dark, busy world underfoot, where the forest recycles everything, turning yesterday's canopy into tomorrow's life. That pull downward becomes impossible to ignore once you notice how the ground feels different after the rain. The leaf litter isn't just damp, it's alive with texture. Your shoes press into a layer that gives back softly, like walking on a mattress made of old stories. Some leaves are fresh and glossy, newly fallen, still holding the shape they had in the canopy. Others are browned and curled at the edges, already beginning to soften. And beneath them, everything turns darker. Crumbly fragments, threads of wood, tiny bits you can't name, all merging towards something that looks like soil, but behaves more like a constantly moving river of decay. You lower yourself into a crouch and let your fingers hover above it, because the rainforest floor has a way of convincing you to be careful without scaring you. It's the quiet authority of a place that's been doing its work for a very long time. When you finally touch the leaf litter, it feels cool and spongy. The top layer is slick with moisture, but underneath it's warmer, like a sleeping animal. You pinch a bit of crumbly dark matter between your fingertips, and it breaks apart easily, leaving a faint stain. It smells rich, earthy, sweet, almost chocolatey in the way good compost smells. That scent isn't just dirt. It's the smell of millions of tiny organisms doing their jobs. This is where the rainforest keeps its library, but it doesn't shelve books. It shelves molecules. A rainforest grows fast, sheds constantly, and then recycles even faster. Leaves drop, twigs fall, fruit hits the ground, insects die, bark peels, animals leave droppings. Life raining down from above like a slow confetti storm. If all of that simply piled up, the forest would drown in its own leftovers. Instead, the ground transforms it almost as quickly as it arrives. The calm surprise is that the Amazon soil is often not the deep, endlessly rich stuff people imagine. In many places, the soil can be thin and nutrient-poor because rain leaches minerals downward and because the nutrients that do exist get locked up in living plants rather than stored in the ground. The forest's richness is not sitting there waiting to be dug up. It's moving, circulating through leaves, trunks, roots, fungi, microbes, and back again. That's why this layer under your feet matters so much. It's not a pantry. It's a conveyor belt. You can almost feel the conveyor belt as you sift gently through the litter. A crisp leaf from the canopy, still recognizable, sits beside a softened leaf that tears like wet paper. A bit of wood has been carved into lace by insects. A small seed is half buried, waiting for the right moment, like it's listening for a gap in the canopy. Tiny black dots, maybe fungal fruiting bodies, pepper the surface. And the deeper you look, the more the shapes of things blur into material, into a dark mix that's less about what it used to be and more about what it's becoming. Fungi are the quiet stars of this world. You don't see most of them because their main body isn't a mushroom. It's a network of threads called mycelium. Those threads run through the litter and soil like a delicate web, creeping into leaves, wood, and roots. They secrete enzymes that break down tough plant material, cellulose, lignin, the stubborn stuff that doesn't want to become anything else. Fungi are the ones with the tools for that job. They don't chew. They dissolve. If you could see the mycelium, the ground would look like it's stitched together with fine white silk. Sometimes you can catch a hint of it under a rotting log, pale threads fanning out like frost. You lift a small piece of decaying wood, and the underside is patterned with that faint white fuzz, and the wood crumbles at the edges where the fungus has been patiently turning it into something the rest of the ecosystem can use. There's something deeply relaxing about that patience. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. The work is constant, but it's never frantic. Bacteria are here too, countless and busy, doing a different kind of breaking down. They take smaller compounds and finish the job fungi begin. They release nutrients in forms plants can absorb. They transform nitrogen, carbon, and other elements, moving them through different chemical states like they're organizing a warehouse you'll never tour. And because the rainforest is warm and wet, these microscopic workers operate quickly. Time moves differently when you're tiny and the temperature is always in your favor. You breathe in that rich smell again and realize it's a kind of reassurance. The forest knows how to clean up after itself. A small movement catches your eye. An earthworm-like shape, or maybe a millipede, sliding through the litter. It disappears almost immediately because this layer is full of creatures that prefer not to be seen. Detritivores, organisms that feed on dead material, are the grinders of the rainforest. They shred leaves into smaller pieces, increasing the surface area so fungi and bacteria can work faster. They're like chefs preparing ingredients for a meal they'll never eat themselves. You think back to the leafcutter ants carrying green flags into the darkness. They were moving fresh plant material toward fungus farms underground. Down here, the forest is doing a similar thing everywhere, but without the neat trails. Fungi farms aren't only inside ant nests. The whole ground is a farm if you zoom out far enough. The rainforest floor also has an odd illusion. It looks thick, but it's not a deep cushion of nutrients. It's a thin, active layer where material is processed fast. Nutrients don't sit still long enough to build up. Roots know this, and they behave accordingly. Many trees spread roots wide and close to the surface, right where the nutrients are being released. You can see thin roots like cords running through the litter, sometimes right under the top layer, sometimes even exposed. The forest doesn't hide its plumbing. It simply expects you not to trip on it. Some of those roots are paired with fungi in another partnership that's so common it almost feels like the default setting for plants. Mycorrhizae. The fungus connects to the plant's roots and extends far beyond them with its fine threads, increasing the plant's reach into the soil. In exchange, the plant shares sugars it made in the canopy, sending energy downward like a quiet payment. The fungus brings back nutrients and water like a delivery service. Sugar goes out, minerals come in, and both sides benefit. It's hard not to find that relationship comforting. The forest isn't built on lone heroes. It's built on trade. You gently place the rotting wood back where you found it, and the act feels like closing a book without losing your place. The decay process continues immediately, as if the forest barely noticed your interruption. Somewhere under that log, the mycelium keeps threading through fibers. Bacteria keep processing molecules. Tiny insects keep chewing. The next layer of soil keeps forming. And then your mind catches on something quietly magical. Despite all this breakdown, the rainforest doesn't feel like it's dying. It feels like it's renewing itself nonstop. That's because decomposition isn't the opposite of life here. It's part of life's rhythm. A leaf falls from above, lands softly, and lies there like a new page added to the library. It will be read by fungi, edited by insects, summarized by bacteria, and returned to the system as nutrients. The forest is constantly rewriting itself with its own leftovers. You shift your weight and notice how warm the air feels close to the ground. Heat rises, but the ground holds warmth too, especially after rain. Warmth plus moisture is the perfect environment for microbial activity. It's like the rainforest floor is a slow cooker set to forever, turning plant matter into nourishment with steady, low effort. No sudden boiling, no harsh changes, just long, reliable transformation. The smell changes slightly as you move your hand across different patches. One spot smells more woody, another more sweet, another more sharp. Each scent is a clue to what's being processed. Fresh leaves, older wood, maybe the remains of fruit, maybe a patch of fungi releasing its own earthy perfume. This is chemistry you can actually sense. You don't need a lab. Your nose is the lab, and it's quietly impressed. A tiny mushroom stands near a root flare, delicate and pale. It's small enough to miss if you're not looking for it, like a miniature umbrella someone left behind. Mushrooms are fruiting bodies, Temporary structures fungi create to spread spores. Most of the fungus remains hidden underground as mycelium, but once in a while it sends up a visible sign that it's there, like a message pinned to a bulletin board. Spores are everywhere in a rainforest. They drift in air, settle on leaves, land on bark, ride droplets of watered-down trunks. Some spores will find the right conditions and grow. Most won't. The forest produces a lot of possibilities, and it doesn't worry about waste the way humans do, because its definition of waste is different. A spore that doesn't grow becomes part of the nutrient cycle. The system is forgiving. You look at the leaf litter again and notice how many tiny holes and tunnels run through it. That's aeration. Air spaces created by worms, insects, and roots. Those spaces matter because microbes need oxygen for certain processes. In waterlogged pockets, oxygen can be low and different microbes take over. Ones that thrive without oxygen, producing different byproducts. The rainforest floor isn't uniform. It's a patchwork of microenvironments, each one supporting a slightly different set of workers. That patchwork is part of why the Amazon can hold so much diversity. Even down here in what looks like a simple carpet of dead leaves, there are countless niches. Wetter spots, drier spots, hotter spots, cooler spots, acidic pockets, nutrient-rich crumbs, wood chunks, seed beds. The rainforest is not only diverse because it's big, it's diverse because it's complicated at small scales. Your fingers brush against something smooth and curved, a seed coat, perhaps, or a nut-like fragment. You lift it and feel its weight. Some seeds can sit in this litter for a while, waiting. Some germinate quickly if conditions are right. Others need a gap in the canopy so sunlight can reach the floor. That's why fallen trees matter, why storms matter, why openings are invitations. The ground holds seeds like the canopy holds water, in small reservoirs of potential. A faint rustle nearby suggests something larger moving through the understory. Maybe a small mammal, maybe a bird. It's distant enough to keep your heartbeat steady. The sound blends into the insect pulse and the drip-tap rhythm still lingering from the earlier rain. The forest remains calm, even with movement, because most movement here has purpose and restraint. You stand slowly, letting your knees straighten, and the rich scent stays with you. The ground has left its signature on your fingertips, dark, earthy, alive. You rub your fingers together, and it comes away as a fine smudge, and you think about what that smudge represents. Leaves that once caught sunlight, now transformed into nutrients that will build new leaves to catch sunlight again. The cycle is almost too neat, except it's not neat at all. It's messy, crowded, and endlessly repeated. And somehow that repetition makes it feel more trustworthy. As you start walking again, you notice thin roots crossing the surface like veins, and you imagine the underground network beneath. Roots intertwined with fungal threads, exchanging sugars and minerals, sharing water, passing messages in chemical forms you'll never fully decode. The forest has its own quiet internet down there too, older than the ant trails and far more extensive. The river's hush is faint in the distance, still turning pages. The canopy above still holds leaf-cup ponds and hanging gardens. The air still carries perfumes and warnings. But under your feet, the forest is doing its deepest work, taking everything that falls and turning it back into the beginning. And in that steady, unseen labor, the next layer of night begins to gather. Creatures and signals that prefer darkness, eyes that reflect faint light, wings that beat silently. A nighttime world that isn't a horror scene, just the rainforest switching shifts with practiced ease. The night shift arrives without fanfare because the rainforest doesn't do grand announcements unless it's a thunderstorm. And even then it's mostly just loud honesty. The air cools a fraction, not enough to feel cold, just enough to feel like the forest adjusted its collar. The sound you've been listening to, those layered insect tones and frog pulses, settles into a steadier groove, as if the daytime chatter clocked out and left the microphones on for the specialists. Your eyes take a moment to catch up. Shapes become softer. Edges blur. The understory turns into a world of silhouettes and gentle motion. And then you notice the first quiet proof that darkness here isn't empty at all. A pair of tiny points glints back at you from a low branch, faint like someone reflected a star for half a second and then changed their mind. You blink and it happens again. It's not glowing the way a firefly glows. It's reflecting. I shine. Many nocturnal animals have a layer behind the retina that bounces light back through it, giving their vision a second chance to catch what little light exists. It's a clever trick, the kind of upgrade you'd pay extra for if humans were offered it as an add-on. The trade-off is that their eyes can flash back at you when light hits them. Moonlight, starlight, or the smallest stray reflection. In the Amazon, you don't need a flashlight to sense it. Sometimes the faintest sky glow finds those eyes and returns to you like a whisper. The points shift and the creature moves, quiet, deliberate, and you catch a soft outline. A small frog, perched on a leaf, perfectly content in its own damp kingdom. It doesn't jump away. It doesn't need to. It's part of the night's normal rhythm. It has probably been here for hours, waiting for insects, listening to rival calls, deciding whether to call again or save its voice for later. A frog's world is patience wrapped in moisture. Above you, the canopy absorbs most of the sky, but a few gaps show darker blue patches where stars sit, steady and indifferent. In those gaps, movement flickers, tiny, quick silhouettes crossing the open space. Bats. You don't hear their navigation calls because your ears aren't invited to that part of the show, but you can feel the logic of it. The bats zigzag with a precision that looks like luck until you remember it isn't. They're reading the air with sound, mapping leaves and insects in real time. They're not flailing. They're scanning. Bats in the Amazon do a lot more than people give them credit for. Some are insect hunters, doing the night's pest control with quiet efficiency. Some are fruit eaters, moving seeds through the forest like couriers on a schedule. Some drink nectar, visiting flowers that open only after dusk, pollinating them while most of the daylight workers sleep. The forest is full of relationships built around timing, and bats are some of the best timekeepers because they show up when the shift changes. A bat arcs lower and you catch the soft beat of wings, barely audible, more a sensation than a sound. It veers near a cluster of flowering plants you can't quite see, and it lingers for a moment as if sampling the air. Flowers that rely on bats often have strong scents at night, musky or fruity or sweet in a way that travels farther in humid darkness. You smelled those invisible highways earlier. Remember, the perfume that arrived in waves, the air carrying invitations. At night, those invitations can be aimed directly at bats because bats don't need color. They need location, and scent gives them that. Some bat-pollinated flowers are pale, not because they're trying to win a beauty contest, but because pale surfaces catch the little light that exists. A soft glow of petals can stand out in the dark like a gentle sign. The flower offers nectar, the bat gets fuel, and pollen rides along to the next flower like a sticky postcard. It's logistics again, just with wings. You take a slow breath and let your shoulders drop. The night feels organized. You can sense routes being followed, stations being visited, tiny maps being traced in air. The rainforest doesn't turn off. It just changes personnel. A moth drifts through the space in front of you, pale wings catching a hint of dim light. It moves like a thought you almost had, unsteady but purposeful. Moths are one of the night's quieter miracles. Their wings are covered in scales, so fine they look like dust if they rub off on your fingers. Those scales can help them regulate temperature and reduce glare, making them better suited for this low-light world. Moths also follow scent like experts. Some can detect a single molecule of a pheromone from a long distance and fly toward it with unwavering determination. That kind of focus is both impressive and slightly embarrassing for humans, considering how easily we get distracted by a notification that says absolutely nothing important. And moths aren't alone in the air. Beetles hum past, heavier and more direct. Small flying insects move in shimmering clouds you only notice when they cross a gap of sky. The rainforest night air is busy, but it's busy with the calm efficiency of routine. You step carefully, letting your feet find stable ground, and you notice the forest floor looks different at night. Wet leaves reflect tiny highlights. Trunks hold faint glimmers where water beads on bark. Spider webs, barely visible in the day, suddenly show themselves when a droplet clings to a strand and catches the smallest hint of light. A web becomes a delicate constellation between branches, proof that someone has been building while you were listening. Spiders don't need you to be afraid of them tonight. Most are small, and most are focused on the same thing everything else is focused on. Energy. Webs are energy-saving devices. Instead of chasing prey, a spider builds a trap, waits, and lets the night deliver dinner. If sloths taught you the art of doing less, spiders are offering a graduate-level course. You move past a fallen log, and something makes you pause. Not a sound, but a dim glow. At first you think it's another firefly, because your brain loves familiar answers. But the glow isn't moving. It's a steady, soft, greenish light coming from the wood itself, like the log is holding a small, private lantern. Bioluminescence can show up in rainforests in quiet ways. Certain fungi can glow faintly, steadily, especially in damp, decaying wood. The light isn't bright enough to light your path, but it's bright enough to make you stare. It feels unreal, like the forest slipped a fantasy detail into the scene just to see if you'd notice. You kneel slightly and look closer. The glow seems to come from patches along the log, like spilled starlight caught in fungus threads. Bioluminescence is chemistry. Molecules reacting in a way that releases light instead of heat, but the forest doesn't care what you call it. It uses it when it's useful. Some glowing organisms may attract insects that help spread spores. Some might just glow because that chemical pathway exists and doesn't cost too much. Either way, in the damp dark, it reads as gentle magic. You straighten and keep walking, carrying that glow in your mind like a bookmark. The rainforest is full of little lantern moments, and the best part is that they don't demand excitement. They invite quiet awe. Somewhere near the ground, another tiny light blinks once, then goes out. A firefly this time, one of the night's most patient communicators. Those flashes aren't random either. Different species use different patterns, timing and rhythm that helps them find mates without getting confused in a world full of other blinking messages. The forest makes even romance into a coding system. The soundscape shifts again as you move into a slightly more open patch. Insects here are louder, a steadier high tone that fills the air like a thin blanket. Frogs answer in lower pulses. And from somewhere above, a bat passes again, a shape you feel more than see. It's tempting to imagine the night as dangerous, because humans love telling stories where darkness equals threat. The Amazon's night is different. It's busy. It's structured. It's full of creatures that have spent millions of years learning how to live in low light without bumping into things, without wasting energy, without drawing unnecessary attention. Even the predators at night often behave like accountants. They don't want to spend more than they earn. Owls or owl-like birds might patrol silently for small prey, but they don't fly constantly. They perch and listen. Snakes may move, but many will choose stillness, waiting along a branch where traffic passes. Cats remain quiet, conserving. The rainforest teaches this lesson over and over. The most successful strategy is often restraint. You pass another shallow water pocket, just a dark patch between roots, and the surface reflects a faint sprinkle of sky. Something under the surface shifts, a gentle ripple, then stillness again. Night water is its own world. Temperatures change slightly. Oxygen levels can shift. Some fish become more active. Others hide. Insects may lay eggs. Frogs may use the edges. Everything participates in the night in a way that fits its design. You look up again, and for a moment the canopy feels like a dome. The forest becomes a giant, breathing room where the walls are trunks and the ceiling is leaves. Inside this room, The night isn't a blackout. It's dim lighting with excellent ambience. Your thoughts slow. The glow on the log fades behind you. The blinking firefly becomes a distant punctuation mark. The bats continue their invisible sonar conversations above the treetops. Moths drift toward flowers you can't see but can almost smell, that sweet, faint invitation still woven into the air like a memory. And you start to notice something else. In all this night activity, there's still a deep steadiness under it, a kind of security. The forest systems, water cycling, nutrients moving, scents traveling, sound patterns repeating, don't depend on daylight. They simply change tempo. The night shift is proof that the Amazon isn't only magnificent because it's huge. It's magnificent because it's continuous. It doesn't stop working when you can't see it. It becomes more subtle, more secretive, more layered. It turns into a world where the tiniest lights matter, where the faintest reflections matter, where a soft wing beat is enough to tell you someone just passed through. You keep walking, and the air grows slightly warmer again, as if you're moving into a pocket of humidity the forest saved for later. The smell of damp earth returns, stronger, and it pulls your attention down toward the ground layer you touched earlier. The leaf litter, the fungi threads, the nutrient conveyor belt. That's where the forest's deepest conversations continue, not in light or sound, but in the dark chemistry of soil and roots and microbes. And woven into that ground conversation is another story you can almost feel approaching. The human story, not as an interruption, but as a long presence in this landscape. Knowledge carried like seeds, practices tuned to seasons and rivers, ways of living that read the forest signals with a fluency you've only just begun to taste. The human story you can almost feel approaching doesn't arrive as a sudden scene change. It slips in the way everything else does here, through hints. A straight cut in the undergrowth that doesn't look like a fallen tree did it. A cluster of plants that seem too conveniently placed together, like a pantry arranged by someone who wanted to find things again. A faint smell that isn't only wet leaves and soil anymore, but a soft thread of wood smoke, the kind that clings lightly to the air without turning it harsh. You follow that thread the way you followed flower perfume earlier, and it carries you into a different kind of quiet. The forest doesn't become less alive, it becomes more aware. Even the insects feel slightly rearranged, as if sound is leaving space for something older than sound, presence. A small clearing opens between trunks, not a wide, dramatic clearing, more like the forest stepped back half a pace. The ground is smoother here. Leaf litter is thinner, pressed down by repeated steps. You notice how the plants at the edges lean inward, as if trying to reclaim the space, but doing it patiently, not aggressively. The Amazon always wants to grow. It just learns when to wait. Near the edge of the clearing sits a canoe pulled up on damp soil, dark wood that looks almost black in the low light. It's simple, practical, shaped to slide through river channels and flooded forest the way your hand slides through warm water. You don't touch it. You don't need to. The canoe is enough to shift your perspective. People talk about the Amazon like it's untouched, like it's a museum exhibit behind glass. The forest has never been that. It's been lived with, listened to, read like a book that changes every season and still makes sense to someone fluent in its language. Indigenous communities have been part of this landscape for a very long time. Long enough that time stops feeling like a line and starts feeling like layers, stacked the way the canopy is stacked. Your mind wants to picture ancient as a single date, one neat label. The Amazon doesn't do neat labels. Human presence here stretches back thousands of years, and it shows up not as one story, but as many braided into different rivers, different soils, different cultures, different ways of moving through green space without tearing it apart. You hear a soft murmur from deeper in, maybe voices, maybe the river's hush refracted through trunks, maybe your brain filling in the idea of community because it wants company. You keep your pace slow. This isn't a place where you barge in like you own the air. The forest taught you restraint already. People who live here learned it long before you arrived with your big feelings and your very fragile sense of direction. The first thing you notice, once you let yourself settle into the idea of humans belonging here, is that the forest begins to look less like a wild accident and more like a carefully tended tapestry. Not manicured, not trimmed into obedience, simply guided. A grove of fruiting trees stands close enough together that it feels intentional. Some are older, thick-trunked, their branches high and heavy. Others are younger, thinner, waiting their turn. Under them, certain plants repeat. Useful plants, the kind that show up again and again where people have spent time. The forest can grow randomly, but patterns like this are often the signature of long-term relationship. It's easy from far away to assume humans only take from forest. Up close, you start noticing the opposite can also be true. People can shape a forest in ways that increase its abundance, not by forcing it, but by working with how it already behaves. Think of it like the river's flood pulse. Life doesn't fight the rise and fall, it times itself to it. In the same way, many indigenous practices don't try to dominate the rainforest. They time themselves to it and nudge it in directions that keep it generous. You remember how the soil under your fingertips felt? Dark, alive, more like a conveyor belt than a storage bin. It's a small step from that memory to one of the Amazon's quietly famous human fingerprints. The existence, in some places, of unusually rich, dark soils created over long periods by people. You can picture it as a kind of slow alchemy. Charcoal from controlled fires, food scraps, plant waste, broken pottery, organic material layered and mixed and left to become stable fertility. The result is soil that holds nutrients better than many surrounding soils, a kind of human-made groundwork that can remain productive for a very long time. That idea lands in your mind like a warm stone in your palm. Humans not just surviving here, but improving the conditions for future growth in a way that lasts. Not a quick grab, a long plan. It also changes how you view the forest's pristine reputation. Some parts truly are remote and minimally altered. Some parts carry histories written into plant communities and soil chemistry, into where useful species cluster, into old paths that have softened back into green. The rainforest can look untouched precisely because it heals and grows over traces, folding history into itself the way it folds water into air. If you don't know what to look for, you miss the signatures. If you do know, the forest becomes even more mysterious because it's holding both wildness and memory at the same time. You step closer to the edge of the clearing and notice how certain plants have been spared. A sapling here has room around it. A vine has been redirected. A cluster of herbs grows where light reaches the ground. It's subtle. It's the kind of management that doesn't look like management. The Amazon respects subtlety. One of the most calming facts about traditional forest knowledge is how observational it is. It's built on attention, to river levels, to the timing of fruit, to the calls of certain birds that tend to show up before a season shifts, to the way insects change their pulse after rain. You've already been practicing that kind of attention tonight without realizing it, listening for patterns, smelling for messages, noticing how the air changes. People who live here do that with a depth that turns it into a map. A rising river doesn't only mean more water. It can mean fish moving into flooded forest. It can mean certain fruits becoming available because trees time their offerings to the flood. It can mean travel routes changing, canoe paths opening where footpaths disappear. It can mean insects emerging, birds feeding differently, certain plants flowering. The rainforest calendar isn't printed, it's sensed. You think about the canopy ponds you imagined, bromeliads holding water, tadpoles tucked into leaf cups, and you realize how many of the forest resources are hidden unless you know where to look. Water can be above your head. Food can be seasonal and scattered. Medicine can be tucked into bark or resin. Safe passage can depend on which channel is open this month and which log fell last week. In a landscape like this, knowledge itself becomes a survival tool as important as any physical object. It's not the loud kind of knowledge, either. It's more like a deep familiarity. The kind you build when you've watched the same river bend through many wet seasons and many dry seasons. When you can tell from a smell whether rain is coming before the first drop lands. When you know which tree's fruit when, and which animal calls meaning the night is shifting gears. Your mind drifts to the ants again, their trails, their pheromone maps, their quiet efficiency. Human movement here can be like that too. Routes that repeat because they work, knowledge passed along because it keeps people safe, patterns reinforced over generations until the landscape itself feels readable. The difference is that humans also tell stories, and stories hold instructions disguised as memory. You imagine sitting in a communal shelter with a roof of palm thatch, listening to rain drum softly overhead, hearing elders speak in a low voice while children drift toward sleep. The words might sound like myth to an outsider, but inside myth is data. Where the fish go when the river is dangerous. Which plant you don't touch unless you enjoy regretting your choices. Which tree will offer food when the rest of the forest feels stingy. How to move without wasting energy and heat that makes every extra step feel expensive. The forest rewards that kind of learning because it's too complex for shortcuts. And it's not only about survival. It's about relationship. Many communities manage areas like forest gardens, places where useful trees and plants are encouraged, protected, replanted, and harvested in ways that keep the system living. It's agriculture that doesn't erase the forest. It lives inside it. Instead of clearing everything to plant one crop, the planting can mimic the forest layers, taller trees, understory plants, vines, ground cover. So the structure stays familiar, and the soil stays sheltered, and the insects and birds still have places to belong. You feel your shoulders drop again at that thought, because it's the opposite of the anxious human habit of flattening everything into sameness. The Amazon teaches the value of layers. People who have lived with it for a long time often do the same. The air carries the faint smoke scent again, soft and distant, and you realize how carefully smoke can be used here when it's used at all. Fire in a wet rainforest is not a casual thing, and the forest doesn't treat it casually. Controlled use, where practiced, can be strategic and small, tied to specific landscapes and seasons, and always with respect for how quickly things can tip from useful to harmful. That respect itself is a kind of science. Knowing conditions, knowing wind, knowing moisture, knowing the difference between a tool and a threat. Your eyes drift to the dark canopy overhead and the faint glimmers of water on leaves. You remember the river's calm, page-turning sound, the way it scripts the forest's rhythm. Human life here has always been tied to water too. Canoes and channels, fish runs and flood seasons, routes that open and close with the river's mood. Even where people live away from the main river, small streams and seasonal wetlands become part of the map. The Amazon's geography is not static, it breathes. People learned the breathing pattern, and as you stand near this clearing, feeling the forest around you, it becomes obvious that the most relaxing truth about humans in the Amazon is also the most humbling. The forest doesn't need to be discovered. It needs to be understood. It needs to be listened to. People have been doing that listening for a long time, building knowledge that keeps pace with a landscape that never stops changing. The night insects keep their steady tone. A frog calls once, then rests. Somewhere above, a bat flickers through a gap of sky, following a scent trail you can't fully decode. The rainforest systems keep running, and the human presence doesn't cancel that. It can fit into it, the way epiphytes fit into branches, the way fungi fit into soil, the way fish fit into floodwater. You take a slow breath, and the smoke thread fades, replaced again by damp earth and leaf oils. The clearing begins to feel like a gentle pause rather than a destination. A place where the forest's long memory is easier to sense. A place that quietly suggests the next layer of wonder. Not in the abstract, but in the way people and plants share information, and how some of the most powerful secrets of the Amazon are carried inside leaves and bark and sap, waiting for the right hands to recognize them. That suggestion about secrets carried inside leaves and bark stays with you, as you step away from the clearing. The forest closes around you again, but it doesn't feel like it's shutting you out. It feels like it's returning you to the main room after a quiet side conversation. The air is still damp, still warm, still full of layered scents, and now those scents start to read differently. Earlier, they were invitations and warnings. Now they feel like clues. A sharp resin note catches your nose, clean, almost medicinal. You slow down, not because you're hunting for a specific plant like you're on some kind of botanical treasure hunt, but because your curiosity has become softer and more precise. You're not collecting facts. You're letting facts find you. The Amazon is often described as a medicine cabinet, and that phrase can sound like marketing until you consider how plants survive here. This is a crowded world. Leaves get chewed, bark gets scratched. Fungi and bacteria are everywhere, always ready to move in on any weakness. If a tree is wounded, it can't walk away. If a plant is attacked, it can't hide behind a door. So plants do chemistry. They make compounds that taste bitter, compounds that numb mouths, compounds that slow digestion, compounds that discourage insects from returning. They make resins that seal cuts like living bandages. They make oils that repel or confuse. They make molecules that interfere with microbes. They make defenses not as a last resort, but as a constant part of existing. And those defenses, those chemical tools, are often what humans have learned to use as remedies. You pass a tree with bark that looks slightly different in texture, smoother in one patch, rougher in another, and you notice that faint scent again. It isn't a simple smell. It's layered, sharp at first, then sweet, then almost peppery. That complexity is common in plant oils and resins, which can contain dozens of compounds. Plants aren't mixing fragrances for fun. They're building chemical shields. You don't need to name every compound tonight. You don't need to memorize a list. The relaxing truth is that the forest chemistry is part of its design, and the design is one reason life here can be so abundant without collapsing in a mold and rot overnight. The same warmth and moisture that make decomposition fast also make disease pressure high. Plant chemistry is one of the stabilizers, and it's a stabilizer humans have paid attention to for a very long time. You imagine hands stripping a small piece of bark, not harming the tree, just taking what's needed. You imagine leaves being crushed to release oils. You imagine a resin warmed and applied. You imagine a tea made from certain plant parts, not because someone read about it on a label, but because knowledge passed through generations said it helped. Traditional medicine in rainforest cultures isn't a hobby. It's a system built on observation and careful use. This is the part where modern science becomes quietly respectful. Researchers look at compounds plants produce, test them, isolate them, learn what they do in the body. Some medicines have been developed from plant-derived compounds or inspired by them. Some remain complex, hard to replicate, still better understood as part of a whole plant rather than one isolated molecule. Either way, the forest chemistry has offered humanity a lot of ideas. And the forest is still offering ideas because many species and compounds remain understudied. The Amazon is not a finished library. It's a library that is still writing books while you're standing there. That thought could make you anxious if you lean into it the wrong way. Too big, too urgent. You let it stay gentle. You let it be a quiet sense of possibility. A leaf brushes your shoulder as you pass, and it releases a green, aromatic scent like crushed herbs. Some leaves carry oils that can repel insects or reduce fungal growth. Some contain compounds that can soothe irritation or inflammation when used carefully. Some are toxic and dangerous because the rainforest doesn't hand out freebies without disclaimers. The forest medicine cabinet is not a pantry where you taste everything. It's a cabinet with labels written in a language you need to learn. That's why traditional knowledge matters so much. It provides the context, the how, the when, the how much, the don't do that. It's the difference between medicine and mistake. Your mind drifts back to the gentle sarcasm from earlier. Humans love to call something natural as if that means safe. The Amazon would like to remind you that nature's primary goal is not your comfort. Plants make chemicals to protect themselves, and if those chemicals happen to help you in the right dose and context, that's a bonus. If they hurt you, the plant will sleep just fine. You walk past another tree and notice a vine wrapped around its trunk, thick and rope-like. Vines can carry their own chemistry too. Many contain alkaloids and other compounds that affect nervous systems, digestion, pain perception. Some are used in traditional practices for healing. Some are used in ceremonies. Some are simply part of the forest defense arsenal. The rainforest doesn't separate medicine and poison the way humans like to. It separates useful under the right knowledge and don't mess with it. The air shifts and you catch a floral note again, faint like a reminder that perfumes and medicines can come from the same place. Aromatic compounds in plants can have roles in repelling pests or attracting pollinators, and humans often enjoy them as scents. That's why certain resins become incense, why certain oils become perfumes, why the smell of rainforest in a bottle always ends up smelling like someone tried too hard. The real forest smell is not one note. It's thousands. You pause near a patch of understory where the light is especially dim, and you notice something about the leaves. Some have tiny holes, some have edges chewed, some have scars. Herbivory is constant here, and yet the plants are still lush. That tells you something. Defenses don't mean invulnerability, they mean balance. Plants can tolerate some damage. They can regrow. They can outpace pests. They can recruit helpers through scent signals. They can invest in tougher leaves or chemical deterrents when pressure is high. The system doesn't demand perfection. It demands persistence. It's the same lesson the river taught you with its flood pulse. Life here doesn't avoid change. It times itself to it. You walk on and find another subtle human signature. Not a clearing this time, but a plant that seems out of place because it's too useful, too familiar. It might be a tree known for its oil-rich seeds, or a shrub with leaves that are often used for treating minor aches, or a plant whose resin is valued. In many parts of the Amazon, the presence of certain useful species in clusters can reflect old habitation or long-term use. People encourage what helps them. The forest, being the forest, often responds by growing more of it. The medicine cabinet idea becomes more grounded when you think about what medicine means in a humid tropical environment. Infections can spread quickly. Wounds can become complicated. Fevers can be dangerous. Digestive issues matter. Insect bites matter. Relief matters. Plant compounds that reduce inflammation, fight microbes, soothe skin, ease pain. These can be lifelines. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be simple: a leaf poultice for irritation, a tea for stomach comfort, a resin for sealing small cuts. Everyday medicine, not miracle cures. The rainforest supports everyday life, and everyday life is where most healing happens. Your breathing stays slow, and you notice how the forest scents feel different when you think of them as function. The sharpness of resin as protection, the sweetness of flowers as invitation, the bitterness in some leaves as deterrence, even the earthy smell of soil as decomposition at work. The Amazon becomes a world of purposeful chemistry, and that purpose is calming because it makes everything feel less random. A soft sound comes from above, a branch creaking slightly, leaves shifting. Something moves through the canopy, unseen. You remember the bats and moths, the night pollinators following scent trails. Plants that bloom at night can depend on those animals, and the animals depend on the plants for nectar and fruit. Some of those plants also contain compounds that influence the animal's behavior. Attractants, rewards, deterrents. It's all chemistry again, but played out in movement and choice. You pass by a tree whose bark looks freshly scarred in a small patch. Perhaps it was scratched by an animal. Perhaps a branch broke. The tree's response is visible, a sticky resin sheen sealing the wound. That resin isn't just glue. It can deter insects from entering the wound and can inhibit fungal growth. It's a biological first aid kit deployed instantly. Seeing it in action makes the medicine cabinet phrase feel less like a slogan and more like a real description of how the forest keeps itself intact. It also makes you think about how the forest's health and the forest chemistry are tied to biodiversity. Different species produce different compounds. Different compounds create different possibilities. If a forest becomes simplified, fewer species, fewer interactions, the chemical library becomes smaller. The medicine cabinet loses shelves. The perfume network loses notes. The whole orchestra becomes thinner. You keep that thought gentle too. It's important, but tonight it's a quiet importance, the kind you can hold without tension. As you walk, you notice that the air feels slightly less still, as if the forest is opening into another subtle corridor. The insect chorus changes pitch. Frogs call in a different pattern. A faint breeze moves the leaves enough that droplets shake loose and fall in soft taps. The rainforest is always shifting, always giving you a new angle. And with that new angle comes the sense that the forest's chemical secrets aren't only about healing humans. They're about healing the forest. They're about defense, communication, repair, balance. Plants aren't pharmacies waiting for customers. They're living chemists keeping themselves alive in a world full of threats and competition. The Amazon's magnificence is that it does this at scale, billions of leaves producing molecules every day, every night, constantly adjusting. It's as if the entire forest is running a quiet laboratory under the canopy, testing combinations, refining strategies, responding to attacks, rewarding pollinators, discouraging pests, sealing wounds, shaping relationships. Your mind slows further, lulled by that image. A lab that never needs fluorescent lighting, never needs a break room, never sends a panicked email. Just steady chemistry in warm air. And that steadiness, that sense of living systems quietly maintaining themselves, begins to carry you toward a different kind of reflection. Because once you understand how intricate and purposeful the Amazon is, its water cycles, its sound maps, its scent highways, its soil libraries, its tiny engineers, its chemical defenses, you can't help but feel the weight of how easily those systems can be disturbed, and also how surprisingly capable they are of recovering when given space to do what they do best. That weight you feel doesn't land like a lecture. It lands like a quiet awareness, the same way you became aware of the river's slow power without anyone pointing at it. Once you've listened to the rainforest long enough, you start noticing how many moving parts are cooperating to keep the whole thing calm. Water rising and falling on schedule, leaves shedding rain with drip tips like practice manners, ants running their little cities, fungi turning fallen branches into nutrients, scents guiding pollinators through darkness. A system this intricate can feel unstoppable, and in some ways it is. In other ways, it's surprisingly easy to bruise. You keep walking, and the forest still feels steady. That's important. The Amazon doesn't feel fragile when you're inside it. It feels confident. But confidence can make you forget that living systems are built on balance, and balance can be tipped. The first gentle truth is that threat in the Amazon often looks ordinary at first. It doesn't arrive wearing a villain costume. Sometimes it looks like a gap in the canopy that isn't the result of a storm. Sometimes it looks like the understory drying out more than usual. Sometimes it's the absence of a sound you've come to expect. A certain insect pulse missing, a frog voice that should be here but isn't. Absence is one of the forest's quiet alarms. You pass a patch where the ground feels drier underfoot, and the leaf litter crackles slightly instead of compressing in that damp, padded hush. It's a small change, but your body notices it because you've been paying attention. Dryness in a rainforest is not automatically a disaster. Dry seasons exist, and many parts of the Amazon are adapted to seasonal shifts. The problem comes when dryness lasts longer, spreads farther, or arrives out of rhythm, when the forest calendar stops matching the weather. This is where climate becomes more than a word people argue about on screens. Here it's a timing issue. Rainfall patterns shift. Temperatures edge upward. The air holds moisture differently. Rivers rise and fall differently. The forest's flying rivers, That constant recycling of water vapor can weaken if there are fewer trees releasing moisture. Then clouds form differently. Rain falls differently. The system that made its own weather starts losing confidence, like an orchestra missing sections of instruments. You don't have to picture it as doom. Picture it as the forest routine being interrupted. Even you sleep worse when your routine breaks. Another gentle truth: when forests are cleared, it isn't only the trees that disappear. It's the shade, the humidity, the stability. It's the canopy's ability to trap moisture and soften wind. It's the soil's cover, the leaf litter blanket, the fungal threads that like it warm and damp. It's the slow dripping that continues after rain, that metronome that lulled you earlier. Remove the canopy, and the forest floor gets punched by sun and wind, and it dries faster. Dry litter is more likely to burn if fire arrives, and fire is not the Amazon's natural favorite in many of its wetter areas. Fire is one of the scariest words people bring into rainforest conversations, but it's worth holding it calmly. The Amazon isn't a single type of forest. Some regions, especially along edges and in transitional zones, have natural fire histories. Other regions are less adapted to it. The key difference is frequency and intensity. A rare, small burn is one thing. Repeated fires, hotter fires, fires during prolonged drought. Those can change the forest structure, making it harder for the canopy to return to its old density and moisture. When the canopy thins, more sunlight hits the ground. That changes which plants thrive. Vines can take advantage of gaps, spreading quickly, sometimes slowing tree regrowth. Fast-growing species rush in. The forest begins to shift in character. It's still a forest, but it's a different conversation than the one you've been listening to tonight. You take a slow breath and let the worries stay soft. The Amazon has faced change before. Huge changes over deep time. It's been shaped by ice ages, by shifts in river courses, by storms, by natural disturbances. It's resilient, but resilience isn't infinite. Resilience is a skill, and skills work best when the environment gives you a chance to use them. Fragmentation is another threat that sounds technical until you feel it. Imagine the forest not as one continuous canopy city, but as pieces, patches of green separated by roads, fields, or cleared land. Even if a patch remains lush inside, its edges behave differently. Edges are hotter, drier, windier. The forest interior likes stability, edges get more extremes. Animals that move through canopy highways suddenly face gaps they can't cross. Seed dispersers, birds, monkeys, bats lose routes. Pollinators may avoid open, exposed areas. The subtle networks of scent and sound and movement start to fray. You remember the leafcutter ants with their green flags. Their trails work because the landscape is continuous enough for them to run their logistics. Cut the forest into pieces, and even tiny societies feel it. You remember bromeliads holding water like floating ponds. Those ponds depend on humidity and a stable canopy microclimate. Dry the air, and those little reservoirs evaporate faster. You remember the faint fungus glow on the fallen log, that soft lantern in the dark. Fungi love moisture. Dryness changes what decomposes, how fast, and which microbes take over. Even the soil library under your feet changes its handwriting when conditions shift. The calming part, because there is a calming part, is that the forest also knows how to return when given time and connection. Regrowth in the Amazon can be astonishing. In places where land is left to recover, pioneer plants move in first, fast-growing species that tolerate sun and rebuild shade. They're the forest's first responders, throwing up green scaffolding that makes the microclimate more humid again. As shade returns, other species follow, ones that prefer the dim understory and steady moisture. Over time, layers rebuild. Vines and epiphytes come back. Leaf litter thickens. Fungi return in strength. Insects and birds follow the plants. The forest doesn't reappear instantly as the same old cathedral, but rebuilds its rooms, one layer at a time. It's like watching a city restore itself after damage. But the workers are seeds, roots, and rain. Corridors matter here, strips of forest that connect larger patches, allowing animals to move, genes to flow, routes to reopen. A corridor can look narrow on a map and still be enormous in real life. And it can mean the difference between a population trapped in isolation and a population that can travel, adapt, and stay healthy. Corridors are the forest's way of keeping its conversation continuous. Without them, every patch becomes its own small world, and small worlds are more vulnerable to sudden changes. Protection also matters, and protection isn't only a word on paper. It's enforcement, it's community involvement, it's supporting the people who have lived here and steward these landscapes. It's monitoring its restoration. It's choosing to treat the forest as a living system rather than a resource pile. When protection works, you can often feel it in the forest steadiness, the return of familiar calls, the persistence of big trees, the density of understory life, the continuity of trails and waterways. Even the river helps with resilience. Floodplains regenerate. Sediments deposit nutrients. Seeds travel on water. Fish move into flooded forests and back out again, keeping those seasonal exchanges alive. The river's page-turning hush isn't just background. It's part of the forest's ability to heal, redistributing life and possibility through a basin-wide network. You stop near another shallow channel where water reflects a sliver of sky. A leaf drifts on the surface, turns slowly, then catches a faint current and slides away. It's a small image, but it's the whole idea: movement, connection, continuity. The Amazon's grandeur has always been tied to being connected. Forest connected to river, canopy connected to understory, fungi connected to roots, bats connected to flowers, ants connected to fungus gardens, people connected to seasonal rhythms. The threats often sever connections. The solutions often restore them. That restoration isn't instant, and it isn't perfect. Some losses can't be undone in a human lifetime. Some species are so specialized, so tied to a particular microclimate, a particular host tree, a particular river rhythm, that if the conditions vanish, they vanish too. It's okay to feel that sadness lightly, without letting it harden into helplessness. The forest doesn't benefit from despair. It benefits from attention and action that fits the scale of the problem. And attention is something you've been practicing this entire journey. Listening to patterns, noticing humidity, sensing how small systems support big ones. That kind of attention is a quiet form of respect. You keep walking, and the forest begins to feel moister again, as if you've moved away from that drier patch and back into a deeper, steadier interior. The insect chorus thickens into a softer blanket. A frog calls once, then rests. Somewhere above, water still clings to bromeliad leaves, held in those suspended cups like tiny promises. The ground still smells rich, fungi still threading through leaf litter, microbes still rewriting old leaves into new nutrients. The forest is still doing its work, right now, in real time, not as an idea. That's what makes it so hard to reduce this place to headlines. The Amazon isn't a symbol. It's a living system made of countless small routines repeated with devotion. The drip of water off leaf tips, the scent message in the air, the ant trail that updates itself, the bat that follows a perfume to a flower, the tree that seals its wound with resin, the soil that turns yesterday's canopy into tomorrow's growth. You let that steadiness soothe the part of you that wants certainty. The forest doesn't promise that nothing will change. It promises that life will keep trying, adapting, rebuilding, collaborating, if it's allowed to. The Amazon's resilience isn't a magical shield. It's a real, practical skill built on connection and time. And as you move forward, that skill begins to feel like the lead-in to something gentler. Because after facing the fragile parts without flinching, the mind naturally wants to return to comfort. The river is still there, patient. The canopy still holds its hidden ponds. The night still runs its quiet routes. The whole forest, despite everything, still knows how to breathe in cycles. The forest's ability to keep breathing in cycles stays with you as you walk, and it's almost funny how your body starts syncing to it without asking permission. The rhythm is everywhere. Water held, then released, sound rising, then settling, scents appearing, then fading, life moving, then pausing. Even your steps find a calmer cadence, as if the ground has been gently coaching you the whole time. Ahead, the trees thin again, and the air cools just enough to suggest open water. You catch the river's hush before you see it, pages turning in the dark, steady and unbothered. When the river finally appears, it's wider here. The surface a dark sheet that holds small reflections like secrets it's not ready to share. You stop at the bank and let yourself look out across it. The far side is a deeper shadow of trees, a silhouette of that green city you traveled beneath. Somewhere beyond that silhouette are bromeliads holding tiny ponds, ants running their underground farms, fungi threading through leaf litter, bats tracing scent trails through night air, trees lifting water skyward one molecule at a time. You're not seeing those details right now, but you don't need to because you've already felt their presence. The river becomes a kind of summary without turning into a summary. Just a calm reminder that everything here is connected by flow. A slow current line pulls past in the center of the river, darker than the water near shore. It looks almost like a moving seam, and your mind drifts back to those places where black water and lighter water travel side by side, not mixing right away, like two stories being told in parallel. That image fits the Amazon well. It's one basin, one forest, one vast breathing system. And it's also countless local worlds with their own chemistry, their own timing, their own voices. You kneel and touch the water again, letting it cool your fingertips. The current tugs softly, the same gentle insistence as earlier, and it feels like the river recognizes you. Not personally. Nothing here has time for your personal brand, but as a temporary part of the scene. You're one more warm creature leaning close to a cool surface. One more set of senses trying to read a language that's older than maps. The air above the river feels different, more open, more mobile. A light breeze slides across the surface and carries smells from far away. You catch that familiar tea-like note again, tannins in the water. It brings back the memory of the forest floor's rich compost scent. Water and soil, canopy and river, chemistry and biology, all braided. You look up to the canopy line and see faint movement, maybe a branch shifting, maybe a bat cutting across a gap. The night shift is still active. Somewhere behind you, insects keep their steady tone. The frog calls are fewer now, or perhaps you've simply tuned them out. Your mind has learned that the rainforest soundscape is reliable, that it doesn't need you to solve it, only to ride it. A thought floats in. Remember that fungus glow on the fallen log? That small, steady lantern in the dark. The forest is full of lanterns that aren't meant to light your way, only to prove the way exists. Water droplets catching faint sky light on leaves. Eyeshine reflecting a scrap of starlight. Fireflies blinking in coded rhythm. Tiny ponds held in plant cups above your head, reflecting the world upside down. The Amazon doesn't illuminate everything at once. It gives you just enough shimmer to keep you curious. Curiosity is the secret weapon of a good night like this. It keeps the mind from spiraling into stress, but it doesn't keep you awake. It's gentle curiosity, like watching a river move. You shift your weight and sit back on the bank, letting the damp soil support you. The humidity feels softer here, moderated by open water. Your breathing deepens again, slow and even. The river's sound becomes the main texture, and it's so steady it feels like a blanket. The Amazon's relaxing facts settle into your mind, not as scattered trivia, but as a single picture made of many layers. You remember how the canopy works like a city, collecting sunlight and turning it into living structure. Leaves built with drip tips to shed water quickly. Emergent trees taking the brunt of wind and heat. Epiphytes perched above the ground, making hanging gardens and tiny reservoirs. You remember that a bromeliad can be a pond, and a pond can be a nursery, and a nursery can be held by a plant that never touches soil. You remember how the forest helps make its own rain, not by magic but by sheer consistency. Water pulled up through trunks, breathed out through leaves, rising, condensing, returning. Moisture recycling through the basin, the idea of flying rivers that carry water vapor across huge distances. The forest weather is partly the forest's doing, a collaboration between green and sky that repeats with the calm inevitability of tide. You remember the sound map, birds and insects and frogs partitioning the air into frequencies and times so signals don't blur. Dawn and dusk as handoff moments. Night as a different kind of order, filled with routes you can't fully see. Bats scanning with sound, moths following perfume, predators conserving energy. You remember the scent highways, plants speaking in chemistry, releasing invitations for pollinators and warnings for neighbors, broadcasting information into warm air. Ants laying pheromone trails like living lines on a map, updating them constantly. The forest isn't silent. It's just fluent in languages you're only beginning to hear. You remember the tiny engineers, leafcutter ants farming fungus underground, termites shaping soil and building climate-controlled mounds. Small bodies, huge effects. Systems built from simple rules repeated until they become architecture. You remember the quiet predators and slow-motion giants, sloths turning low-energy living into art, jaguars embodying stillness as efficiency, caimans using water like camouflage. Nothing here wastes effort without reason. The rainforest economy is energy, and the forest spins it with discipline. You remember the ground beneath your fingertips, leaf litter as a library, fungi and microbes as editors, decomposition as renewal. The forest floor processing everything that falls, turning it back into the beginning. Nutrients circulating fast, stored in living tissue more than in soil. Roots spreading wide, partnering with fungi to reach farther than they ever could alone. You remember the human layer, too? Not as an interruption, but as another thread. Canoes and flood rhythms, knowledge tuned to seasons and sounds, ways of living that read the forest signals with deep familiarity. The idea that the Amazon can carry memory inside plant patterns and soil chemistry, and that care can be subtle and long-term. And you remember, softly, the fragile side, the ways connections can be severed, the way dryness can change the forest's mood, the way edges behave differently than interiors. But you also remember resilience, not as a slogan, but as the forest practice skill, regrowth when given time, corridors that reopen pathways, cycles that resume when the system is allowed to do what it evolved to do. Sitting here at the river, all those layers stack into one calm feeling. The Amazon is not one thing. It's many things cooperating. That cooperation is what makes it feel so vast and so alive, and it's what makes your mind settle when you listen to it long enough. The river slides past, and you watch a leaf drift by near the shore. It turns slowly, catches a small current, and moves on. You imagine where it came from, a branch overhead, a tree that held it for months, sunlight turning into sugar, turning into cellulose, turning into leaf. Then a gust, a drop, a fall. Now it floats, then it will sink, then microbes will read it, fungi will thread through it, nutrients will return to roots. Even this small leaf is part of the forest's endless recycling, part of the same steady logic that makes the Amazon feel like it never runs out of itself. The night air is warm but comfortable. Your eyelids feel heavier, not because you're forcing them, but because your brain has stopped scanning for novelty. It has novelty, plenty of it, but it's the gentle kind, the kind that doesn't demand a response. The forest behind you continues its quiet work. Somewhere up in the canopy, a bromeliad cup holds water, and inside that cup something tiny moves. Larvae wriggling, a tadpole resting, microbes busy as dust motes in liquid. Somewhere on a trunk, ants touch antennae and adjust their routes. Somewhere in leaf litter, mycelium threads through a fallen twig like slow lightning made of white silk. Somewhere above the river, a bat arcs through a gap and vanishes, completing another loop of its nightly path. And you sit at the bank, letting all of it be true without needing to control it. The river's hush becomes smoother in your ears, as if it's blending with your breathing. Inhale, cool air from the water. Exhale, warm air into the night. The cycle repeats, and it feels natural, like your body finally remembers it doesn't have to sprint through every moment. Your thoughts drift to the canopy one last time, imagining the forest from above, waves of leaves under moonlight, occasional glints of wet surfaces, pockets of water held in green rosettes, routes traced by nocturnal wings. The scale is immense, but the feeling is intimate. The Amazon can hold millions of lives and still make room for a single quiet listener. And as the river keeps turning its pages, your mind starts to let go of the need to read every line. The water moves. The forest breathes. The night shifts gently around you. The rest can wait. The river's sound softens further, becoming less like separate ripples and more like one continuous hush, a long exhale that doesn't end. Your shoulders feel looser. Your jaw unclenches without you noticing when it happened, and the air seems to settle into a smoother texture, as if the humidity itself has decided to be kind. You keep your eyes on the dark surface, but your focus doesn't grip it anymore. The reflections blur into quiet shapes, and the far bank becomes a single silhouette, calm and steady. A leaf drifts past again, slower this time, or maybe your sense of time is simply stretching, widening, making space for rest. Behind you, the forest's chorus continues, but it's no longer a collection of separate sounds. It becomes one soft layer, like a blanket pulled gently over your thoughts. The occasional frog call is a round, distant note. The insects are a thin, even shimmer. The breeze across the river is a slow stroke across water, barely there. Your breathing stays slow, and each breath feels a little deeper, a little easier. You don't need to hold on to facts. They can float in and out the way river leaves do. The canopy city, the rain the trees help build, the invisible scent trails, the ant highways, the quiet fungi light. Everything can remain in the background, present but not demanding. You let the image of the Amazon become simpler. A vast green body resting under a dark sky, water moving through it, air moving above it, life moving gently within it. No rules, no deadlines, only rhythms that repeat and repeat until they feel like home. The river keeps flowing, patient and unbroken, and you allow your mind to follow it without effort, as if your thoughts are drifting on the surface too, turning, slowing, slipping past the shore, heading into quiet. Your eyelids grow heavier, and you don't fight it. You don't need to do anything. The forest is still working, still breathing, still cycling water and nutrients and night air, and you can rest inside that steadiness. The hush of the river stays with you, soft and constant, and the last clear image in your mind is simple. Dark water, gentle movement, a canopy of leaves holding tiny ponds like little pockets of sky. And then even that image fades into comfort,